Welcome everybody to the May workshop meeting. And we will begin with the pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Stacy, please call the roll.
John Cassiano. Willard Delager.
Here.
Joseph Fatzinger. Todd Hernandez.
Here.
Becky Height. Here. Lauren Hunsiker. Here. Todd Leiser.
Here.
Rachel Scheffler. Here. Jennifer Cenovitis. Here.
Thank you. And I think both Joe and John said they'd be 15 minutes late. And next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. And I would like to suggest a modification to take under district finances all of the items that are related to Andrea's presentation with special ed. And that would be 5.04, 05, 06, and 09 under finances. And we'll group them into curriculum and building issues under the 2.03 special education plan, if nobody has any objections to that. And then we'll get Andrea up and hear everything she has to present this evening in one shot. So with that change, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve with the modifications you defined.
Motion by Mr. Leiser, second by Dr. Hunsiker. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Welcome once again, and at this point in the meeting, and as well at the end of the meeting, we offer courtesy of the floor to anyone who would like to address the board. And seeing no one in the audience as a visitor, we'll move on to Scott Scherer's presentation from PFM on the bonding and the financing discussions that we've been having. Scott.
All right. You rather sit or stand?
Standing is a little easier with projection for the recording, but
I'll stand. All right, well, thank you. I guess.
you want to use the mic, you're welcome.
Over there? Okay.
That way we can stream you out to the people who are watching.
All right, well, good evening. I guess this is kind of a recap. I guess I was on the phone maybe back in March or early April, I lose track of time, when we were talking about the potential borrowing for the school district based on some of its potential needs here in the near term. So this is again a continuation of that. I think, before this evening's over, there's kind of a couple things we want to try to get answered to see if we want to not vote on, but just sort of get a general consensus on if and how you want to move forward with certain things. So that'll kind of be how we sort of end after I go through some of the informational stuff. So maybe first just kind of recapping. Great. Just hit there we go.
Oh, you got it.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, I won't touch it.
Back in business. All right, so interest rate chart. So probably you're all reading or hearing on the news or on the radio what's going on in the markets. There's a lot of volatility. Why don't we just focus on the bottom chart? So the bottom chart is a closer view. It doesn't, the one in the middle goes back about 30 years. The one below just goes back about 2 years. And it just gives you a closer snapshot of what's been going on. And really, kind of all the volatility has started about mid-January. So prior to that, we were kind of near all-time lows. The spike on the left-hand side on the bottom chart was when the pandemic initially hit and the market kind of just stopped for about a month, and then it resumed and the rates came quickly back down. But we're kind of on the right-hand side now, sort of where that level was. And most of it, again, has all occurred basically since the middle part of January. And a lot of that is inflation fears, the Ukraine-Russia issue and, other international issues that are going on. So where it goes from here, I don't think anyone truly knows. Is it going to continue to go up? Is it going to kind of plateau out, or is it going to look like, early 2020 when then it starts to go back down again? Today, you probably heard that the Fed increased short-term interest rates. So what we're talking about here are the longer-term rates. So this is an index, a 10-year municipal index, and what the Fed controls is the overnight long rate. So they just increased rates 50 basis points or 0.5% today. They're expected to, well, it varies, but they're probably going to do a couple more rate hikes yet this year or even this summer. And more likely the Fed funds rate, which is the overnight lending rate, might be in excess of 3% by, say, this time next year. So it really just kind of depends on what sort of news we get over the next few months and how aggressive the Fed is. But I think the 50 basis point increase today by the Fed was anticipated. Now it's, are they going to do 2 more 50% rate increases in June and July? That's to be determined based on what, kind of what we see happen. So rates are, have definitely gone up, long-term rates, and now it's just where do they go? So sometimes when the Fed starts to increase short-term rates, then, what happens to the long-term rates, which is what we care about when we're talking about borrowing. Do the rates, if the short-term rates go up, do the long-term rates go up as well? Or do the short-term rates go up and the long-term rates stay about where they are? Or do the short-term rates go up and the long-term rates actually go down? So that's kind of a positive yield curve, a flat yield curve, and a negative yield curve. We've seen all those different examples happen over, say the past 20 years, just depending on different things that are happening. And so the crystal ball broke, no one knows exactly where it's going to go, but it's just kind of our job to sort of help present the information and, get you to the 1 yard line. And if you want to proceed based on collectively what we all think is going on, that, again, that's kind of our main job, is to present everything and show you what the numbers look like based on today's interest rates. As far as just kind of some key topics, some of these we touched on at the last meeting, the market update just kind of went through. As far as the potential projects, the numbers that we have in the handout this evening assume, I think kind of everything on the list is done, and that's about a $13 million construction fund deposit based on various estimates. And that's including middle school site lighting, bus yard improvements, middle school auditorium, middle school HVAC upgrades. And, with this project, one of the things that we're going to talk about is if you decide to do any of that or all of that, all the projects, do you then want to borrow for 100% of the project, or would you want to use some of the district cash, whatever that may be, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million? I know we've had different discussions over the months on possibly doing that. So again, it's which projects do you want to move forward with, or how much in total projects do you want to move forward with? And then if you do you want to contribute any cash? And it's kind of part of that consideration of using cash, kind of back to the first part of our discussion about interest rates. So last year, let's just say for example, your investment rate and your surplus funds, your general fund, were not the best in the world. You actually, this school district had one of the better ones out there just because of your relationship with your bank and getting good investment rates. But for a lot of municipalities and school districts, the investment rates that they were receiving were, maybe 10 basis points or 10%, very, very low. Well, now we're hearing that the Fed's going to be continuing to increase the short-term interest rates. We could be looking at investment rates back to 3% or somewhere in that ballpark, which now we're talking about meaningful investment rates. So that's what kind of plays into the conversation of, do I use cash to lower the borrowing, or do I keep the cash and maybe earn more interest on it as well that you can use for other stuff? So that's kind of needs to weigh into the discussion somewhat as well. As far as section 3, the borrowing laws, I think we talked a little bit about this before, but when you go to borrow money on a tax exempt basis, which obviously what we want to do, because tax exempt rates are generally lower than taxable rates, but we've seen some weird anomalies even last year where that wasn't always holding true. We need to meet certain IRS tests. So we got to work with your bond counsel to make sure that we pass all these different tests. And one of them is the reasonable expectation test, which basically means at the time of the issuance of the debt, that you reasonably expect to spend 85% of the proceeds within 3 years. And there's kind of due diligence test and this expenditure test, and overall time test that kind of relates to that. But that's really kind of the critical thing, that if we have kind of estimates that looks like the projects, again, about 85% of the money will be spent on these projects, then, that fits the mold to borrow on a tax exempt basis. If it doesn't look like you can do it in the 3 years, then we either need to delay the borrowing or scale down the borrowing to make sure that you're able to do that. If at the end of the 3-year period, it turns out that you did not spend, say, the 85% of the proceeds, then that money just becomes kind of restricted as far as how you're able to invest it. And just starts to get a little more complicated with the what's called arbitrage rebate, a yield restriction, that it really need to monitor then an interest rate, and some money may need to be rebated back to the IRS if you earn too much on it, if you did not spend the 85% within that 3 years. So that's kind of for later discussion, but the point is, we need to make sure that there is that expectation that the money can be spent. And then bank qualification consideration in section 4. So over the years, I've talked a lot about them, that if you looking to borrow money, although you're on a fiscal year basis, July 1 to June 30, we look at it, we being the finance team, but more specifically the IRS, when we have to pass their test, they look at borrowing on a calendar year basis. So they basically say that it says that the school district and has $10 million every calendar year to borrow on a bank qualified basis. Bank qualified basis means you get a lower rate than a non-bank qualified. So anything 10 million or under is bank qualified, anything over 10 million is non-bank qualified. And so the bank qualified rates, again, are a little bit lower, and they also have more favorable prepayment provisions. Typically, the $10 million and under transaction will have a 5-year prepayment ability. Anything over 10 million might be 7 years, might be 8 years, maybe up to 10 years, depending on the size and the structure of that loan. So it's not quite as favorable to the district. But again, many issuers do non-bank qualified transactions based on the size of the project. But again, that also plays into, because we're talking about if you do everything $13 million, that maybe you do want to use a couple million of your cash to keep it at that bank qualified, or again, maybe not, it depends on some of those other factors. So we'll touch on that a little bit. And then a sample timeline down the bottom, that we definitely do not want to rush anything. We want to make sure that everyone's comfortable that if you do want to proceed, that we go according to your timeline. But as far as the fastest that we could go, I'm not saying that's what we want to do, but if we did want to go as fast as we could, this evening at the Finance Committee, May 11th, we could be ready for a resolution for the board to entertain to move forward with the financing. And then we'd probably be able to execute the financing later this month, probably in late May, and then it would close, probably late June. We need to all documents need to be filed with the state. They need to sit on it and review it for about 20 to 30 days. So that's why there's that basically one time period between the sale and the settlement. So that's kind of the high level stuff, and we'll get into a little bit more, but I just want to kind of hit on the borrowing requirements as far as the tax laws, and then the bank qualified differences as well.
Scott, if I could, am I correct that you, for the resolution on the 11th, will need to know if it is a bond or a bank finance?
It can be drafted flexible, that it could be bonds or notes. And so we would make sure the bond council would draft it, that it would give us that flexibility for either. Right now, the current draft is basically just for bonds, but it could be modified to include both bonds or bank loans.
But then you would also incur the Standards and Poor's fees and the other rating call fee, which you wouldn't if it was a bank loan.
If it was a bank loan, typically, and this isn't always the case, but a general rule of thumb is to do a bank loan, it's typically less upfront costs than a paid at closing, but typically a higher interest rate than you pay for the life of the loan. And again, not always with a general rule of thumb. A bond issue typically has higher cost upfront, but a lower interest rate over the life of the loan. And so one thing that we could do here is basically just do a dual track. Talk to your local bank and what can you offer, and kind of go through that, and then also compare that then to a bond issue. Ultimately, we have no vested interest in which direction you go, whether it's a bank loan or bond issue, we just care to get the best deal out there. So either one perfectly fine by us, but that's why I think, we would defer the rating call until we get a little bit further direction. I mean, I think it could be a pretty quick process with your local bank to talk to them. I did put a call into them today. We just weren't able to connect, so probably tomorrow we will, just to kind of get some rate indications. And that way, then we can compare what it looks like to do the bank loan versus what it looks like to do the bond issue. But yeah, we don't want to incur unnecessary costs. So that's why we want to sort of probably do that dual track and not put one before the other and do the steps in the right order.
Scott.
Yes.
Number 3, the borrowing, the expenditure test, the due diligence. Does that apply to a bond when it's above 10 million or below 10 million?
Yes. So that applies to any size financing, and it applies to whether it's a bond issue or a bank loan.
Even a bank loan?
Yeah. It's no, that if you want to borrow on a tax exempt basis, whether it's 2 million or 200 million.
Okay, so it's borrowing or bond?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So this page was pretty small, a lot of numbers on here, but this is more, this is more for our internal purposes to make sure that when we're structuring the debt, I can't even read it, I gotta look at my paper here. My eyes aren't so good anymore either, that we need to make sure when we're structuring the debt that not only do we meet the federal laws, but also then specifically for this test, the state laws. So we want to structure debt as efficiently as possible so that it's the least budget impact on an annual basis, but also the kind of most affordable from a total interest expense over the life of the loan. So you're gonna see the structure that we are doing is actually, well, what we really care about is looking over in the far right-hand side, that your total debt, so let's just look at column 11, which is on the top, on the far right-hand side, that right now, between your different variable rate loans and your bond issues and bank loans, that your total debt service is, say, $4.1 million. And it's level for that number, kind of all the way up through 2034 fiscal year, and then it drops off. So one of the structures that produces the least amount of impact is to really kind of not have any principal payment in the next, say, 12 years out through 2034. And then, so you're basically paying interest only during that time period. And then you start wrapping in your new principal when your existing debt pays off. That's called a wraparound structure. But then you need to look at, how does that interest expense compare with other alternatives, because you are delaying payment of principal. Your debt portfolio is structured pretty well where we don't have to delay the principal prepayment for too long. Like I said, basically 12 years. There's many other issuers out there that they would not be able to do wraparound structure because their debt is level for 20 or 25 or 30 years. So that then it would be delaying their principal payback way too long, and so the interest expense would be enormously high. Here, you're kind of in the sweet spot that it's just a kind of a minimal delay in the principal payback. But we need to make sure again that after you layer on this new borrowing, whether it's 5 million or 8 million or 11 million or 13 million, that column 11 on the far right hand side is either level or decreasing, that there's no blips anywhere throughout there. There's no kind of spikes that would not pass the state law requirements, and then it would be rejected and kind of have to start over. So that's why we really care about this page is, obviously we're focused on your new borrowing that you're contemplating, but we need to make sure that it fits within the overall debt portfolio when we look at all your other outstanding bond issues and note issues. And just to maybe go back, so you have a pretty good mix of debt as far as financing vehicles. The two on the left, columns 2 and 3, those are variable rate bond pools. So that's kind of like a hybrid of a bond issue and a bank loan. So that's kind of an in-betweener. And then columns 4 through 9 are bond issues. And then column 10 is a bank loan with neutral pole. So you sort of have a good mix of different financing vehicles there. So here's what it looks like for the district. So if you go out and borrow to get basically a construction fund of $13 million to fully fund those projects based on those estimates with the wraparound structure, We're again assuming a closing for the latter part of June, assuming June 21st. You go down to column 4 below there, where in the first year, in the 2022-23 fiscal year, your payment would be just a little under $400,000. And then it would be a little over $500,000 out through 2034. And then you see the bigger payments of about 3.2 million and basically 8 million for 3 years after that. But again, the key point is when you look at column 5, right to the right of it, that your overall debt is either about 4.3 million and then it drops off down at the end to about 3.8 million thereafter. So that's what it would look like. You borrow $13 million. The budget impact would be about $530,000, depending on the ultimate interest rate that you need to find new revenue source to pay for that or cut expenditures. And the total payback over the life of column 4, when you pay back both the principal and the interest, is about $20.9 million. So again, that's kind of the, let's say, the scenario where you do all the different contemplated projects. Here's the actual detail schedule that feeds into that summary. It just again gives you a little bit more clarity with the principal payback. So what we were showing on the prior page, this page is the debt service related to that borrowing, which is both the principal and interest. That's what column 4 is. Now on this page, this is all the stuff that bakes into that summary page. So in column 2, that's the semi-annual principal payments, and you basically see by state law we have to have a tiny amount of principal paid for it to be to pass the state test. So we have $5,000 principal payment in each one of those years until 2035. We're assuming for this illustration of 4% interest rate in column 3, and then it shows the semi-annual and fiscal year debt service. We are not assuming in column 7 any state reimbursement, just because these do not look like PlanCon eligible projects, and the moratorium on PlanCon as well. So either way, I don't think you'd be getting any state reimbursement on your debt service.
What's this? So, sorry to ask.
Hmm?
I get the interest, semi-annual debt service column.
So column 5 that's just the total of column 2 and column 4. Okay, so that's the principal plus the interest. And so we showed on a semi-annual basis because that's how you would pay the debt on a semi-annual basis. And then column 6, we then turned into a fiscal year number just to make sure we're kind of showing what you need to budget for the full fiscal year. And that's where the $395,000 and for the first year, and then about $530,000 thereafter.
Scott, why so much in calendar year 2035?
So that is where, so if you look here, so this column 9, existing local effort. So that's right now, all the debt that you currently have outstanding, that is the kind of the combined payback of all your existing debt. And so you see out there in column, or in staying in column 9, but in the 2034-35 fiscal year, it drops off substantially down to basically $1 million. So that's right now, if you did nothing else between now and that point, this is what your debt service would look like. So now with the new borrowing, we're saying, okay, you basically already have mills in place you have the millage rate in place, the real estate tax rate in place to cover that debt service in column 9 of about this is after any state reimbursement of about $3.8 million. So that's why it's a little bit lower number, because that reflects the money you're getting from the state as well. So now to structure it efficiently, let's layer on this new principal payment when your other debt starts to pay off. So that's why when you kind of look at this, so this payment here in column 6, it's basically $3.3 million number in the 34-35 fiscal year. That's when that's the real small payment. And then now you have no other payments in your existing debt column. So now we're able to layer on bigger pieces. But when you look at the far right-hand column, you're still either level or decreasing. There's no balloon payment or anything like that. That's what the state will not allow the district to do. So that, again, is kind of more detail of the schedule. And then if you do decide you want to move forward with a borrowing resolution, like the district has done many times before, it's called a maximum parameters resolution. So what your bond counsel will build into there is a schedule that looks like page 8, which shows down at the bottom in column 2, not 13 million, but basically 14.5. In column 3, it shows a maximum interest rate of 5%. So we know we're not gonna borrow 14.5 million, but basically in order to satisfy the state requirements, so we don't have to come back for additional votes when it comes time to pricing transactions, we basically just get everything done ahead of time, is that we take what you think might be the maximum amount you need, in this case it's about 13 million, and you add on 10%, 15%, somewhere in that ballpark to give this maximum dollar number. So that when we actually go to price the bonds or the bank loan, whatever it may be, that not only are we lower than this interest rate, but in every maturity, we're lower than all these numbers as well. Not just in totality, not just that 14.5 million, but in each one of those respective years. If we don't satisfy that test, the state will reject it, and then we gotta kind of start all over again. So that's why we build in that cushion, and it's very, very standard to do that. So if we would approve a borrowing resolution for $14.5 million, but then, we take a few weeks or whatever you need, a few months to decide what you ultimately need. And let's just say it's the $13 million that you need. Well, then after that transaction closes, whether it's a bond issue or bank loan, bond counsel would file some documents with the state and said, you approved us for 14.5 million, we only use 13 million, eliminate that 1.5 million from our borrowing capacity, and it goes away. Same if you only end up needing to borrow 6 million. Same kind of letter would go back to state saying, we only borrowed 6 million at 14.5, eliminate the rest of that, and then it gets wiped off the district book. Again, very common procedure that has worked well for the district, and we've probably been doing that for maybe 12, 13 years or so, just to give us that flexibility. So I just didn't want anyone to get too anxious when they saw a $14.5 million number or 5% interest rate. That's basically just all to satisfy the state. But ultimately, if you did want to move forward, your schedule would look more like that page there, where it's basically a $13 million number and a lower interest rate. So those are the highlights.
Can you go back? So
It's been
13 million one.
Yep.
So if I play this back, just to kind of summarize it, so I make sure I have it. Column 9, this is our current, this is what we're currently committed to.
Yes.
By basically by 35, we're tax, we're free of this debt, right? Which we know is never going to happen because there's always going to be
Right.
capital projects and whatever. By layering and restructuring this incrementally, we're going to pay, give or take $536,000 per year over what we're already expected to spend. And then restructuring this debt, you're layering in another basically 4 years, to our debt service, right?
Yep.
So it's essentially.
Yep, exactly. Again, the concept there is right now, so again, column 9 is showing that is all your existing debt, that's the principal that you're paying each fiscal year, it's the interest you're paying each fiscal year, less any state reimbursement that the district gets. So that's why we call it a net local effort, because that's ultimately what you're responsible for. The state does pay a tiny bit of your debt service payments. And so, again, right now you have local effort of about 3.7 million. You have a millage rate that covers that and then some for all your other operating expenses. But you have a millage rate in place kind of for that 3.7. You need to either raise rates or find, raise millage rate or find other revenue sources or cut expenses in the budget so that now you can cover 4.2 million of debt service if you borrow this full 13 million. And that 4.2 million will stay consistent all the way down through. And in the last 3 years, it actually dropped a little bit down to that 3.7 million. Now we could modify the structure a little bit to tighten it up, but we like to leave a little bit of room down there in the end, just in case 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you need to borrow a little bit more money for some other project, that still gives you that little wrap around, that little drop off down there, you can wrap more debt around. But yes, you explained it well. That's how that works. Any other questions with kind of number or the structure of the debt? Yes.
Real quickly, you said we would add another 550 into our budget if we would do this for a 13 million borrow. And we're shortfall for 2022-23 is 2.4 and change. Where's the where's the money gonna come from?
Stacy, can you go up one slide? On column 4, that 395,000 that we would pay in next budget year is not included in the proposed budget for tonight. So we have to keep that in mind when we're making a decision tonight for budget and for how we're going to proceed. That as of right now, we have that deficit, and that's not included in it.
In what's not included.
The 395,000, we would have to add that to the proposed budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Well,
On top of what
he said-
already the deficit
Scott
would
said it
be.
was 550.
Well, the first year is about 400,000.
Okay,
And then you get to the next full year, then it jumps up to basically 537,000 per year. So yeah, I think the key point is here, we definitely do not want to rush anybody. We want to go at your own pace, but I think there were some thoughts at the last meeting about where interest rates currently are and where they may go, and does it make sense to move quickly? And I think that's why we're back. That's why bond council has drafted up a resolution that if you did, again, it would be modified a little bit, but if you did want to move forward with adopting that at your May 11th meeting, we would, you want to know, first of all, if you do want to proceed with that, and then are you comfortable with the resolution having that $14.5 million maximum parameters in there, knowing that that basically covers only 13 million of projects? Or do you think you're going to do less in projects, or do we scale that back? And then it comes down to, do you want to consider using any of the district's cash, general fund balance, to contribute towards the project, or just borrow the full amount? Those are kind of two pretty cool things I think we should discuss a little bit.
Question for Art. The projects that we're looking at, what kind of a timeline are we expecting to complete all of these projects? 1, 2, 3, 4 years? Or-
The site lighting and bus yard repairs could be something that's completed in next year's fiscal budget. The auditorium would be the following.
So 2 years,
Yes, sir.
but you have
Best case scenario.
best case.
And
Worst case, 3
2 or
years.
3 years.
Worst case would be another year.
So if we, we keep thinking of 8 years from now, in 2030, we have the TIF
Right.
maturing or whatever.
It basically expires, and then you're going to be getting all that.
And then
rest
we
of
get
it.
another $1 million.
Yeah.
In tax revenue. But that's in 2030.
Yes.
And if we were to borrow 10 million and take $3.5 million cash out of fund balance for these projects, and then when the TIF expires, can we reestablish the fund balance with that money and build it back up to what we borrowed for this? Similar to what we did with the stadium. We took $3.5 million to do the stadium. And in doing that, if you crank through the finances, with the fund balance, with the debt service that you have projected here on the screen be less than if we take that money out of fund balance, apply it to the projects, and then take the
So in round numbers, if
$1 million
we,
from TIF back into there.
so here's a summary page, assuming you borrow the full 13 million, in very round numbers, if you just borrow 10 million, this 537,000 on average would probably drop to closer to 400,000, give or take.
It's $130,000 less.
Yeah. And then kind of on the flip side, if you use, for simple math, let's just round up to 4 million. If you use 4 million of cash for this example, and we think that over the life, over the next, say 16 years, the term of the debt, that if the Fed does what they say they're going to, which you never know, which is based on the most current readings as of today, that the short-term investment rates could be around 3% or greater. And if you think that's going to stay that way for the long term, then you should sort of factor in that the loss of interest earnings from using that. And so $4 million times 3% per year is about $120,000 per year of lost interest earnings on that. So they kind of like cancel each other out more or less. It's not a perfect wash, but it's close. So that's where I just wanted to make sure, we were kind of thinking about that. Sometimes the decisions are a little trickier when you can actually invest, and it wasn't all that long, you could invest maybe 5%, right? And you can still borrow it at 3%. It's a different answer at that point. Or if we think the investment rates are gonna stay at 0 for a real long time and borrow through, that's again a different answer, but we're kind of sort of right there in the middle at the moment. That's where financially, it's kind of more or less, it is pretty close to a wash. Now, the one thing that we would have to, if we end up, well, whether we do a bond issue or bank loan for this transaction, you still have a credit rating for all your other outstanding bond issues. And so even if we don't do a bond issue for this one, the rating agency is going to want to do at least an annual review. And one of the things that they always focus on is fund balance. Now, you using 3.5 million fund balance, that's more than likely not going to spark any kind of downgrade, but it's just something that they're going to inquire about. We're obviously going to need to tell them about, and it may, raise some eyebrows. Rating agency, you're using 3.5 million. We are using 3.5 million, but we're also then lowering the amount we need to borrow and less of a budget impact. So it's just a little bit of a story that's going to need to be told by using cash. So it's just something to think about, that they're definitely going to hone in on that, oh, your fund balance is going down, and they're going to do their own calculations and come back with their own assessments. I just want to sort of point that out, that that's going to be part of the conversation.
Hey, on the market update, you have current rate, and I know this is all about timing, the current is about 2.8%, but on the estimate, you're using 4. Where are currently, if borrowing could be done today, what would be the rate? So I know timing is everything, it's that's an estimate.
So the index that we're showing on page 2, it's just that it's an index. So just like when you're maybe applying for a personal mortgage, a lot of mortgage brokers track the 10-year treasury index as a proxy. That's a taxable index. This is a tax exempt index. So just like our own personal credit ratings, that if we see what the 10-year treasury is, and let's just say we have a great credit rating, we pay all our bills on time and don't have much credit card debt, then our actual rate is going to be pretty close to that index. If we don't have the best personal credit rating, then our mortgage rate is going to be 1 or 2 or 3 points higher than an index. Same thing with this, that this is an index that basically is used as a proxy for any city, township, school district, and then depending on your credit rating and the overall structure of your deal, it's going to price maybe 50 basis points or 1% or 2% over that index. So in the example, I was using 4%. I think, if you did it today, you'd probably be a little bit less than 4%. You're not going to be dramatically less, but maybe at 375, 385, somewhere in that ballpark. But that's a great point. I didn't want you to think that you're going to get the 280 that's on this, because again, that's just an index that we use as when it comes. So some will price much closer to that index, some will price much wider than an index. But it's just kind of gives you an indication of where rates have been.
Yeah, I just want to get an understanding of how conservative or not the 4%.
It's a little conservative, but not too
gotcha.
much.
Thank you.
Not too much. And so what we would do is to really test that is we would put a bid out, we would RFP for the bond issue. So we would put it out to the top 6 underwriters that do business in Pennsylvania like we've done before, see what kind of results we get back from them, and then we compare that to the indications that we get from Nutropoli to see which would make the most sense for the district.
So what do we need to do tonight?
Well, I think it's again more or less a kind of a head nod that the way the current resolution is drafted for consideration for next week looks good as far as the dollar amount in there. And again, we'll talk to bond counsel to structure that could be flexible for a bond issue or bank loan. And that's really bad, because if you do take action on the resolution on your May 11th meeting, that means that an advertisement needs to be placed in the local newspaper. And so that advertisement is going to say that Northwest Virginia School District is contemplating a maximum borrowing rate or maximum borrowing amount of $14.5 million. It may even outline the general project description. So that's why we want to talk about this evening, that there will be something in the paper prior to the May 11th vote, and that's just state law that requires an advertisement before you vote on something, and then another advertisement after you vote on something, so that folks can see what's going on. So that's really kind of the main thing is be comfortable with that for the resolution, and then it would also be good, although it's not a this sort of requirement to know exactly what you want to do about cash, using cash. So the proposal that, or not proposal, but the option that you laid on the table was keep the borrowing $10 million and then just use cash for anything over that amount. That's perfectly fine option to consider. And that's probably how we would structure the RFP. And our discussion with the bank is, hey, the school district is looking to borrow $10 million, can the bank qualify? Give us your rate. But if you're not sure, then we would probably do the RFP for both a $10 million issue as well as say a $13 million issue.
So you can go out with two.
Yeah, you can, yes, yeah. So we won't, so for the key thing for the resolution is the dollar amount. Then the next decision would be when we would go to, so let's just say we do the RFP and it turns out that you want to go forward with the bank loan. Then again, we'll need to know how much cash you want to use so we can sign the bank loan, or on the flip side, if you want to do a bond issue, we would need to know how much cash you want to use. And we wouldn't be ready to probably price and actually lock in that rate. Again, we need to go through the credit rating process. It would probably be late this month, more than likely. So you have a few more weeks to think about that. Again, if you say, we'll just come back in June and present again in June, and then we'll make our decision then, we can do that as well. Again, we're not trying to rush you. We just want to sort of get everyone thinking about sort of different assumptions that are going to be built.
And the only reason to do it now instead of waiting until June would be to beat whatever interest complications are coming, which we don't.
Which we don't know. Yeah.
If you could predict that curve, Bill, the one that's gone from an all-time low to a disproportionately high increase over a
Right.
short period of time that beats every prior period, your guess is as good as
Yeah.
anybody.
I don't think any of us would be here right now if we knew what the market was gonna do, because we'd have our house in Tahiti or somewhere. We won't be worried about this.
Scott, were these numbers today reflect today? I missed that part. You answered that.
Yeah,
Is it a half a point
these rate
increase?
assumptions reflect, because there's not a direct correlation between the Fed increase of 50 basis points and these rates, but these long-term rates did have that assumption, an assumption of a pretty substantial federal rate increase.
Already built in.
Yeah,
So you guys were assuming this was gonna happen?
yes. Yeah, the market, basically the market in general was assuming that.
Wait a minute, 2%, right?
I'm sorry, the what?
Market.
Yes.
The market
Is about-
up to down because.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is a timeframe that we can do is, have the resolution approved, or, we could say, we'll just hold off on the resolution, let's just do the resolution in June as well. This would give us time, if you wanted, to put out an RFP to the bond underwriters, talk to the bank, and get everything worked out, maybe do a scenario or two where you borrow 10 million, 13 million, come back in June, and present, and then you could adopt the resolution at the June meeting, or again, you could just get the resolution out of the way May 11th if you want to. There's no right or wrong answer, it's really just kind of comfort level.
So at the 4% that we're estimating, that seems high only relative to what we've done recently, right? We've done a lot of refinances where we're able to
And we're low.
lower rates, yeah. So, but 4% will probably be one of our higher issuances right at the moment because of all the refinancing that we've done.
Okay.
But additionally, I know we don't want to speculate, but in 3 to 4 years, if rates drop, we could lower this one again like we've done in the past, correct? So you balance
it's
that
like
with the
a-
timing of the cost. So do we wait till rates go down and then the project goes up another $1 million? Or do we, you know what I mean, bite the bullet on some type of
Well, that's the
financing?
risk. The risk is these projects are getting more expensive
Right.
every year, more so than what the interest.
Right.
Correct.
The inflationary impacts on steel and this, everything else is driving.
Yeah, and I know this scares everybody, but I kind of want to put that also in perspective. That we're not locked into the 4%. And even
Right.
if rates continue to go up, we might look back and be like, hey, we're glad we did it at 4%, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because to your point,
Opportunities.
a bank loan, as I mentioned before, is more likely gonna be prepayable anytime. So 2 years from now, 5 years from now, rates go down, you can refinance. A bank qualified bond issue will have a 5-year call feature on it, which means, once you hit that 5-year point, you can refinance it if rates are lower or anytime thereafter. And if it's a non-bank qualified issue, so over 10 million, that call date's gonna be 7 years or 8 years. 10. So you're still gonna have that prepayment ability. It's just they're a little different depending on the size.
I was thinking it was 4, but it's 5.
5%.
Okay.
Scott, I know we were talking about maybe bringing it back in June, but as far as the budget process, it's a lot easier to fit this into our proposed budget as far as, instead of waiting until June and then figuring out where that money's coming.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I want to go back to that question that John asked. We don't have anything in the current budget.
Yeah, if you read ahead and saw the presentation,
Yeah.
that presentation does not include.
There was a question I was gonna have for later on, but you answered, there's nothing in the budget
No.
for
So you-
increase in
And
debt
because
service.
on that presentation, it's maxed out for tax increase, it come out of fund balance. for tax.
Okay, and what would it be this year?
400,000.
22, 23, yeah, about 400,000.
Assuming you borrowed full 13.
So that'd be another fund balance.
Yeah, I mean, Brian and I talked about it today when we got Scott's presentation with the numbers in it. I mean, if there's $100,000 in there that essentially funds the architect fees and the things that you approved at last month's meeting, you'll see Ryan, we do the fund balance, the proposed final budget, Ryan will call that out. If you decided to move forward with some sort of bond or loan or some combination thereof, we would increase the budget, that $400,000 for next year, at least for next year, funded out of fund balance. So your budget would go up 400, your fund balance usage would go up 400. But then the following year, you need to work that 537 and change into millage into the budget. Because it's now a recurring cost, because Scott has that first payment due June 30th, 23. So it will be, unless that's able to be moved by a day, the last day of the year next year.
Would actually do, that's
Two
shown on,
pieces.
yeah, 2 pieces.
That's true, that's true. You're semi-annual, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to hold this to the budget part of the meeting, because I do feel like we gotta get to the broader conversation of if there's a $2.4 million deficit right now, that's pretty much a $2.4 million deficit for the remaining whatever years, right? The future, plus whatever incremental costs are gonna come in, net of tax increases, right, plus another 600,000, right? So round numbers, we get about a $3 million deficit per year. So that's at the current, without the TIF, that's 5 years of tax increases in a row. It gets us to a $3 million payback. The 5 years of tax increases, your point's valid though, because of another $1 million that comes in here in 2030. But that presumes we don't have another big project at some point too, which we will. Right? Or fast forward 10 years from now, we're doing another $10 or $15 million project of some sort.
So a couple $1 million on the roofs alone.
Right, roofs, so that's sort of what we're looking at. We're looking at 5 years of tax increases. Magic, there's a couple warehouse projects that might show up, right? They are kind of on the table now. We might get some additional dollars there.
Have we heard anything about that? If they were to pass and be built,
Um,
do we have to wait at all, or will they have to
No,
start paying us?
so the weight is associated with the TIF district. So where the 2 warehouses are currently proposed, my understanding from Brian Cobb, they're not in the TIF district because of where they're located on Kernsville Road and along Route 100. There is, I believe, one more warehouse that went up or is going up in the TIF district that will be included in that. So they physically make a district, a geographic district. That's the only things that go into that TIF. Everything else would be whatever the differential between what they're paying on the land now and what the improved land would be.
And the existing TIF went from $12,000 in taxes to $1 million, right?
Yeah, if you wish to
Or
see
900.
the details on the TIF, it's in your budget book on like page 7. And that is under the presentation on 5.01. There's detailed on, I think it was page 7 when we looked it up earlier. And it describes the TIF, so the base real estate taxes collected was 12,944. The district then entered into the TIF, which is a 20-year agreement for all of the warehouses that were built in the TIF district, essentially tax incremental financial district. And so the information on there as of today is that we would have another $990,000. Now, this will be something more than that in 2030, but right now it's $990,000 would be what you would get as a one-time increase when you get the money from the TIF in 2030. It won't be 990, then it'll be whatever it is at the time.
1 point.
Yeah, it's gonna be somewhere in the upwards of $1 million within, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, Bill said to me earlier, what's your recommendation? I said at a previous meeting, I know that there was lots of conversation at the board level about the interest rate and the urgency of doing so. And so certainly it is the board's call, but I would not be a proponent of borrowing the $13.5 million. If you wish to move forward, the risk you have is the HVAC project and the escalation of the costs. Because if you recall 2 meetings ago, I said what I would probably do, or my recommendation would be to take the current projects you have slated on the table, as long as they come in where we anticipate them to come in, out of fund balance to the tune of $3.5 million. And as long as we are okay on hedging the risk, waiting until you are closer to the influx of that time where the TIF comes in 2030 to consider the HVAC project. The interest rate now is one thing that creates urgency. The other thing is obviously the fact that that project's not getting any cheaper. And what will that look like even 6 years from now? But I don't know that I would be borrowing. At least I would want to see, that's why I asked Scott the question, what your bank loan options would be in terms of interest rate. Obviously, doesn't matter to me either. I mean, certainly Nutrapoli has been good to us, but we want the best overall deal for the district, and that's the recommendation we're going to make. But I at least would want to see if you drop that below 10 million, if you wish to proceed with the HVAC, what would a bank qualified be with taking the 3.5 out of fund balance and piecing those pieces together if you wish to do the HVAC now?
But the more we take out of fund balance, the less is available to balance the budget in the future.
Yes, accurate statement. And what Scott talked about earlier on the rating call, we went through, Leslie and I went through the same rating call when we took the 3.5 million. Scott, I believe, was on the line. We took the 3.5 million or so, 3.9 million out for the stadium. So if you remember, that was the same kind of questions of concern of you're dumping $4 million out of your fund balance. You're dumping it out for a one-time project. You know, it was a lot of conversation about the pre-planning, a lot of conversation about the TIF, a lot of conversation about lowering the debt and not borrowing that $4 million for the stadium and using existing funds. So it is a story you tell when they get you on the phone, but I suspect it will be somewhat of a similar conversation that we had when we took the 3.9 out for the stadium.
Yeah, but that's only on the conversation with the rating.
Oh, yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I'm not talking
Yep.
about that. I'm just talking about, what we keep, what we have.
Yeah, so all of the projections in Ryan's presentation that talk about the anticipated fund balance don't anticipate you taking 3.5 million out. So obviously, when you're talking about the length of time to when you go into a negative or zero fund balance, doesn't include you taking 3.5 million out of there, and it does significantly deplete the available fund balance you have by 3.5 or so million.
So to wrap this up, Scott's looking for direction for the amount. 14.5.
Well, I think the kind of the first direction is moving forward with a resolution for next Thursday. Bond council will need to get that to the paper tomorrow morning or tomorrow by lunch. So the one he had drafted for 14.5 million, is that okay to send to the paper, as long as we make sure it fits for both bank loan and bond issue? That's kind of the key thing, is for me to have the green light to talk to them about getting that added to the paper. And then it's kind of the next decision is, what would you like me to talk to the bank about and send the RFP to the bond underwriters for 10 million, 5 million, 13 million, or 2 different options?
Let's handle one at a time. Are we good with the advertisement going in the newspaper tomorrow, that you are contemplating a borrowing? If you wish to take action as early as May 11th, it must go in the paper tomorrow.
It doesn't lock us into anything.
Correct.
The only thing you lose is the newspaper advertisement and
Ratings call.
whoever sees it.
The ratings call, we'll have to pay for the ratings.
No, he said we could delay the ratings.
We'll delay it till after we get kind of the indication back. We can get the indication back from Nutri real quick and from Monterey within.
Yeah, he said we could prolong the rating call. But so if you advertise in the newspaper, you're out the newspaper advertisement essentially. But we do need to know what documents you wish to be prepped. So you have to remember, this is the one meeting where it's a quick turnaround because of the proposed final. So whatever we need prepped, we're gonna need to get done the remainder of this week and no later than Monday night of next week, so that you can take action on it next Wednesday. Which would be the resolution to go out for whatever million or dual track, like Scott mentioned earlier. That's what we need your direction. So the document we prepare for you is the right one you want for next week.
Okay, so the head nod is for the advertisement,
We are advertising in the
which
newspaper.
is a non-binding advertisement.
It is.
I like it.
Good.
Okay. So you got the advertisement.
So we get the advertisement.
Now we got the two options of 10 plus 4 out of fund balance or bank. Or 10 plus.
I think you,
Bank and 10 or 14.
yeah, yes, yeah, that's right.
I think before I can agree to something like that, I think John's point to, we are adding to a deficit. So I think the conversation, and maybe it does fall under the budget of what are we doing to combat that at some level? Like, I'm concerned, so I'm super conservative. My husband will tell you, I struggle spending a quarter. So this is obviously well out of my spectrum, but I want to be sure we have the conversation about, we don't just keep adding and we add and we add. I agree some things need to be done and should be done, and there's some concern about rates, but I am concerned that we're adding and we're not looking at what can we do differently to curb the solution of just constantly raising taxes. Yeah, that may need to be done, but I'm not sure it's always the solution. And so I'd love to talk more about, as someone new in this seat, about what we are going to do projecting moving forward to work at that.
I mean, we'll get to this during the budget conversation, probably in depth. One thing that the three of you were not here for is we cut $1 million out of personnel last year. We do have another teacher elimination that we will detail tonight. If you look at our budget, 66% of it is our staff. And the increases to staff health and benefits and salary alone exacerbate your ability to raise taxes. So the only way you're coming up with those millions of dollars is potential cuts. So when we talk a great deal in terms of how do you change the trajectory of the revenues and expenditures being closer together rather than further apart. 7 years, no tax increase on top of what we have done to cut. You will have to be okay with either significantly increasing class sizes and or elimination of programs, which has been a budget goal that we have tried, not totally 100% successfully. We cut programs last year in gifted, we cut programs last year in computer science. We cut programs in every grade level from K through current year 7.
So I think maybe I should just say it like this. I know cyber charter is a huge loss. So what additional efforts could we do to try to bring those families back to our district? You know, I'm not holding the flag saying I would volunteer and go to every house. You know, I'm just saying, other than flyers, what other marketing, one-to-one, person-to-person, meetings, phone calls, to really bring people back to the brick and mortar now that we're hopefully doing away with COVID.
We have done, I would say, everything on your list, including, and if you look at our budget, we're going to present tonight, we have taken $520,000 off that line item in 1 year. That doesn't mean it's still not already still a $2 million line item, because it's close. So yes, flyers, cold calls, personal conversations, soliciting at grocery stores and things where people see people. We are not beyond any of it. Do you want to add something?
Even for early intervention meetings, when parents come to us and they're identified special ed, we try to have conversations about, programs and services that we can offer here. We offer an IEP, we do the evaluation, we let them meet our staff. But ultimately, if it's their choice, it's their choice. So that started prior to kindergarten.
And we did open houses in the last couple of years, open house deliberately, and we had a number of families come to just do tours and talk to teachers. As of even this week, we had 2 students in doing tours with the principal and did a shadow a day. Come see what it's like, come sit in the classroom, have a shadow, I think that's what we're calling it, shadow a day.
Cyber charter is definitely a big chunk. It's, this year is what, 2.2, last year was 2.7, we got 500,000 back. Maybe as people are coming back from COVID, but that's some low hanging fruit if we could grab it, but for tonight, for where we are right now, the answer to the question is either we cut programs, we take money out of fund balance, or or reduce the outflow of money for cyber charter tuition, or all of the above.
I like the answer.
Yeah, and there's and we've talked over the years about what are some of the big items that could be cut or what are the prioritized list of items, right? Busing, for example, I look at art, right? That is an optional service.
It's not mandatory.
That is not mandatory. You could say, we are not busing any child to this school. Well, what do you think is gonna happen to your check for charter expense?
Because you do have to, we did find out the hard way, even if we don't bus, we do have to bus back.
So there are some big line items like that, but they're hard to, you're not gonna swallow them. To Jen's point, without increasing taxes for a 7-year period, that's sort of hurt ourselves here by not preparing for the inevitable. We also delayed quite a few big projects, and the reality is it's a big infrastructure to maintain, and things like HVAC systems do over time have to be dealt with. You can't just kick the can forever on roofs and HVACs and things. Now, does that mean you have to do a middle school auditorium reno? No, right? That could be,
or other projects. That's too.
yeah, you can kick the can on some of them, but they will eventually catch up. You don't have an ADA compliant, auditorium right now. Yes, it's grandfathered in, but if you want to put a child in a wheelchair on that stage, it's not that easy right now. Or if you want somebody to come in that door over the broken concrete, you're dealing with that, right? So those are, again, is that nice to have, or do you consider that to be essential, right? You don't have to provide extracurricular, presumably, right? We can start looking at all the extracurricular, right? Let's go down the list, right? Are we cutting football? Are we cutting all the sports? Are we cutting all the music and drama and all the things, that's, if we don't get the cyber charter issue under control and figure this out, all of that will disappear from our public school systems across this country. Because the cyber charters don't have to pay those fees and those programs, right? So it's the definition of what a public school is, I think, that we all are gonna be dealing with in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and overall, we, over time, and you'll become more fluent this over time, we are not afraid to make the hard decisions in the areas that have the least impact. We've done that over the number of years, and we kind of said this during, I would say, elementary configuration. There are programs in the middle school that will or will not exist, and the middle school might or might not look like it does currently when some of those families get to the middle school because of the reductions we've had to make there. And we will continue to make there, because going forward, so I've said to you, there's a 7th grade teacher on tonight. There will be likely future reductions in the middle school. The problem after next year is that until you have a few of those classes at the high school, you have very little I'm not gonna call them easier without programmatic changes, reductions to make because they're cross grade level classes. So you need to wait till a few of those low classes get into the high school before there are any staff reductions in the high school. And so you are running out of reductions without it making any other curricular, programmatic, or class size changes of any type of dollars that's going to make an impact in millions of dollars.
Okay, back to the question. We've got to give Scott and we can go both ways, right? We can go with the RFP. We can go for 14 borrowing, or we can go 10 plus.
Yeah, I can bet two options in the RFP, yep,
Do that, see what they look like.
and have the same discussion with Nutripoli, 10 million or 14 million.
Yeah.
And then we get results, so let's say May 4th, probably give us a week and a half, 2 weeks to get results back, for that. Depending on how you want to proceed from there, your next finance committee after that will probably be what?
June 1st,
June
and it's a
1st.
workshop at June 1st.
So I could come back at that point to present, puts a little bit of a pickle with the budget number. Yeah, I mean, maybe it just makes sense to put some kind of placeholder in there for the budget, but come back at the June 1st meeting. And if you already approve the resolution next week, there's no more legal action that needs done. It would just be kind of that June 1st meeting would more or less just be a head nod. Yep, we're good with the $10 million. Or, whatever it is at that point. Yeah.
And 10, like you said, could be 6. If, even though you say it's 10, you said that we could, if it comes in lower, we could pull it back at the final hour.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, 14 and a half is the maximum amount. 10 million is the kind of the maximum amount in the mag qualified range. But if you say, yeah, we're only gonna do 6 million projects or 7 million projects, that's still fine. We just need to know, at that June 1st meeting then, so we can go back to Nutripoli and say it's only gonna be 6 million, or go to the underwriters and say it's only gonna be 6 million, and then we'd be ready to execute the transaction shortly thereafter.
But Ryan, to your point, this doesn't help us then in coming with a final budget package for June, right?
I mean, we can put the placeholder in, like you said, 400,000. I can put that in for your vote next week for the proposed budget. As we move forward to you approving the final budget, we can decide to remove that or not, or how we're gonna go about things.
And that placeholder would come out of fund balance.
Correct.
I think having the debt service, because that may be a question from the credit ratings. Okay, where you're borrowing this money, you're using fund balance, do you at least have your payment kind of in the budget for the upcoming year? And that'd be a good answer to say, yes, I have that in there. That'll maybe alleviate some of the rating agencies' concerns.
Okay.
I think I have my marching orders.
Scott, I think is going to leave. Does anyone have any additional questions for Scott, notwithstanding what we'll get into with the budget? He is your interest rate and crystal ball predictor.
You guys have like a pool going on the over under on the rate by the next.
I think the June meeting are probably gonna increase another 50 basis points. I've been wrong many times before, but that's my gut reaction right now. Another 50 basis points in June.
Okay.
You bet.
Thank
So
you.
if anything comes up in the next, hour and a half, 2 hours, or so, feel free to text me. I'll try to get back to you. If
Okay.
something related to this. Otherwise, I'm gonna make a call to bond council, get the ad in the paper, and do the rest of the
So you're
stuff.
gonna handle Kevin, you're gonna adjourn.
I'm gonna hand it to so walk out. And June 1st, we'll be back. Good.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank
Thank you, Scott.
You bet. Thank you.
You should stay for the part in the line item where we save some money in a refi. There's a line item in there about refi, saving your old refi.
No refi this year.
Right.
Maybe next year,
Yeah, we got some already. All right. Next item on the agenda is under curriculum and building issues. Approval of Act 80 days.
Okay, Leanne, it's on, or you want me to?
Right.
Leanne?
Yes, thank you. Just as a reminder, this is an annual item that I do bring to you around this time every year. All public schools in Pennsylvania are required to provide 180 days of instruction for all students, in addition to 900 hours for elementary schools and 990 hours for secondary schools. However, Act 80 does allow for exceptions to that 180-day requirement as long as the minimum hourly requirement is still met, and it is not used for time lost due to inclement weather. PDE has defined certain activities which may be approved for the Act 80 exception, and they're listed in the documents that I've attached. This year, we are only asking for an exception of 1 day for our seniors because they will be graduating and will only be able to attend 179 days.
And there's usually more than one. We cut it very close this year with the June 1st and the June 6th, so there's only one. Leanne, Mr. Lizer wanted to know, can we make them come in on Saturday?
You're going to have to talk to the senior class about that. I don't know if that would be very favorable for them.
Okay, well, we'll take action on this next week, right?
Yes.
Any questions on that, Katie? Routine end of the year decision we have to make. Thank you. Next item is the IU facilities plan. This is another routine item.
Turn them all of it.
So this is a yearly routine item, and the IU, their board approves this. Well, the IU presents this to the contacts, the district contacts, all the directors across Lehigh and Carbon counties. That occurred on March 2nd, and then their board voted for it on March 21st. So it now comes to you for also approval, and this just outlines the facilities that the IU is using across Lehigh and Carbon counties. And the second document is the signature, the resolution that goes on it.
Yeah. Any questions on the IU? Okay, Andrea, why don't we just go through the special ed plan and then the 4 items that we're going to bring up from the district finances.
Stacy, do you want to open the special ed final plan? I'll just maybe go through that.
Do you have could you sit up here at the microphone, or do you have everything laid out here? Okay. That would be easier for communicating, streaming. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the last time, this is every 3-year special ed plan is approved, but we do a compliance monitoring audit every 6 years. The last time we did it was 2019, and I was out on maternity leave, so some of you might remember Morag, Christy Sherman presented to you. So if, perfect. You can see the steering committee there. This will be approved by you after a 28-day review, which is why it's being presented now. But it will be approved hopefully in the 15th meeting, and we submit to the state by July 30th, 2022. Just as a little recap, I have reviewed this with the steering committee. We have a preliminary approval from the state, which is our Bureau of Special Ed advisor. I consulted with him for the last several weeks, and we do have a preliminary approval as well from him. So I think we're in good shape, except I just wanted to review and go through the contents of the plan so you understood what was there. On the first few pages, which is, oh, sorry. There we go. Okay, so this is these indicators that are outlined here. We have to do tables throughout the school year. And basically all these tables are indicators that the state wants to review to make sure you're identifying kids appropriately, you're not forgetting specific classifications of students. Annually, we submit those. We don't have any indicators flagged at this time. So that's all that first section. The second section is the school district area improvement and planning. That really comes directly from the compliance monitoring audit. We had a corrective verification action and we completed all those items about 6 months after our last audit. So nothing in there is flagged at this point. So there's no, there's nothing we need to enter into this plan as a a verification or some kind of approval plan. These next couple pages talk about, really, it's the academic components of the plan. I don't want to bore you with all the text that's in there. I know you've had time to read it, but essentially it's how we identify kids and how we provide appropriate planning for them, including kids who are maybe incarcerated or kids that can't be provided an education here and might be in our local group home. And then the real buzzwords, in my opinion, for the plan are the least restrictive environment and how we handle making sure that students are provided an education with their peers, their non-disabled peers, as much as possible. Just to give you a little oversight, I would say that first paragraph is probably the most important data to review for us. When I came in 2015, we were significantly under the state average by about 13%. The state average was like 62, almost 62. We were hovering around 48. So we were on corrective action for that. And in the very first year, we closed the gap significantly, and then by 4%, and then almost 3% in the subsequent years. So now we're still slightly behind the state average, but it's by about 3%, which is a significant improvement in my opinion. That section right there is just our out-of-district placements and where our kids are placed across the out-of-district placements, and it gives you the numbers and where they are. The positive behavior support section really just outlines how the district handles positive behavior support plans and programming for students that need that type of support. And then this educational program, these are our actual teachers, our Northwestern Lee High School teachers, and how much or how many students are on their caseloads and how much time the state considers that they're a full-time employee. So that percentage really is based on whether their students are identified as itinerant, supplemental, or full-time. So that goes through page.
There's one of these for each student,
One of these for each teacher.
each teacher.
Yeah, and then the students are identified throughout every one of those. So, you know, if you had 6 students on your caseload, one of those boxes would represent your program profile. So there's a lot of stuff there. And then this is the classroom, this is the special ed facilities, and I just want to take a minute and thank Mr. Oakes and his team, because he had to do some linear measurements instead of square footage, and he got me that information relatively quickly, so I appreciate that. And this is new in the plan this year, so it's just a different format than the state had used. Every classroom that we use for special ed, there's a pre-approval process. The VSE advisor has to come in, look at the classroom, determine if it's in the ebb and flow, make sure that the dimensions would satisfy the requirement for the numbers of students in each of those classrooms. They come on site, they approve it with me, and then we go in and electronically submit it for an approval. And then the final section is, well, these are our supports and services. These are the professionals identified throughout the district that are providing service to our students. And then this is the professional development. So you'll see the areas of autism, positive behavior support, paraprofessional training, transition training, science, literacy, or reading, parent training opportunities, and IEP development that we have put together that would provide training for our staff in the next 3 years. So that's why the plan really occurs every 3 years. It's the training piece for our staff and parents. We do send out notifications if there's parent training for the IU or any other trainings that we're notified of through the Blackboard or Connect through parents through email, so they're aware of those trainings and can attend if they would like. And then this last page is just the signature and affirmation of our approval of the plan. Well, that's like a quick rundown of 50-some pages, but if anyone has any questions, I can certainly entertain.
Question, to determine how many special ed teachers you need per student, is there a formula that the state makes you follow? Or is that, how do you figure that out?
So in this section with the program profile of the teachers, if the student is full, let's say you have a classroom of 12 students and they're all full-time students. So they're in need of a lot of support. The maximum caseload that teacher would be able to absorb is 12. If there are supplemental students on that teacher's caseload, the maximum number they will be able to provide support is 40. if they're itinerant, could be up to 65. To give you a general idea of the programs we offer, all of our teachers service students that are itinerant and supplemental. So none of them go over the caseload of that full-time requirement. So that is the formula the state uses. For us, we look at not just the numbers, really who the children are, what their needs are, and what the building, what the staff currently is in the building, and how we provide those supports. So they use a formula, I would say we do. We look at all, we consider all things, including where they are placed in the regular ed and when they need to be pulled out.
And that doesn't include any of the aides that are in the.
So the aides are not
That's something
counted, yeah, the aides are not counted in their special ed supports. It is only certification of special ed professionals. So it would be a special ed teacher, speech and language pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist. Those only providing special ed support. And the other thing I did not mention back on that first page, just to give you an idea of where we are with numbers. The number that I took for this plan, right there on the top there. So our enrollment and our number of special ed students, that's a snapshot of when I started the plan, I'll say in the beginning of February. I pulled that number. Just to give you some rough numbers, in 2015, we were about 344 special ed kids with a percentage of about 14.8%. In 2021, we were at 376 kids with an average of 17.5%. You can clearly see that over the past several months, we have significantly jumped. And again, this is where we talk about, is our office still trying to determine, is this COVID related? A lot of the identification is for social emotional issues. And so we're now hovering close to, I'll say 20% of special ed population. That's not unique to the state. That's very, it's very common across other school districts that I've considered in Lehigh and Hardin counties. And it is very close to the state average as well.
So 20% of all students in the district are receiving some level.
Some, right? So it could be speech, OT.
Is gifted included?
Gifted is not.
What's a group home?
So group home, you might even have, I have never visited the group home. I'm sure Mrs. Holman knows exactly where it is, but do you want to describe it?
Well, I'm not gonna describe it. We do.
Yeah, we do. I can describe it.
Okay.
Well, so a group home would be if a child does not have guardianship or doesn't have an appropriate guardian. So they might be placed in a group home where then they are provided care. And we do have one in our district where we've only had one student in my time placed there that also needed special education supports, which then becomes our responsibility to provide those supports while they're in that group home. Or we take them to school from that group home and we place them somewhere else where they can get those services.
The students that would be placed in a group home would be our responsibility to educate, even though their parents wouldn't be residents here. In the particular group home that's in the district, they also accept adults, which is why Mrs. Edmonds is saying there are often individuals placed that are out of school age. So we don't often get a person who is still school eligible from the group home that's in our district.
Totally different than foster.
Yes, foster would live in a residence with foster parents, foster family. Still our responsibility to educate, not biological parents, not in the district, but would not be a facility setting, would be a home setting with a family. And we have foster, so you heard about foster children. That was one of the areas the auditors tested, the number of foster children that we have.
So we're responsible for that kind of an individual, but when it comes to a cyber charter school, ensuring that the child is getting the least restrictive environment and all that in a proper IEP. How do we know that the kids from our district going into charter schools and cyber schools are getting that kind of
So they have this, the charter schools are all responsible. They're the LEA for all of those students. So they're the local education agency. And they have a director there to hire or contract out with school psychologists, their own special ed staff, whether they're speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists. And they are required to do the same, they're required to provide the same supports and services that those children need as we would be, because they're a charter school. So they have the same requirements that we do. Northwestern is responsible to audit them in the 5-year charter process. Just Circle of Seasons, the ones that are in our district, which is Circle of Seasons. And so when Northwestern audited them, we did something very similar to the compliance monitoring audit. And we were, so when we were there last was about 4 to 6 months prior to their last audit. So we reviewed a lot of the same materials that the state would have reviewed for their compliance monitoring audit. And that does ensure that they're providing services to the students that they should be. As best we know how. I mean, we're not there daily, so
Right,
we don't know, what exactly the students are getting, and we're not reviewing their IEPs other than on a 5-year term.
We're not privy to what their IEP calls for.
No.
Does this, sorry, I'm asking this 20% question again, that 20% aligns with the number of IEPs we would have? Ratio of IEPs, non-gifted, but,
Not gifted, but the number of IEPs that we have, yes.
and that percentage presumably then is something that the charter would have to publish as well, right? Could we hear a lot in the
Yes.
media about IEPs being a much higher ratio within the charter world than in the public school?
Yes, and there are annual reports, so if you wanted to in your spare time, you could Google special ed data reports, they're SEDR reports. The latest that you can pull up is the 2021 school year, but you can select any district there and get their report for the last, I think it's decade at this point. Yeah, it goes 2007, 8, so it's there's some long data there.
Yeah, and if you wish not to go through, I do believe that if you go to the Future Ready Index, which is the old SPP, the new SPP, you can pull it by school, which is, are you interested in a particular school? While I have it open?
Yeah, Circle of Seasons, I just, logical questions.
Sure, I know where you're going.
So there's a long list here.
20.3, Jen.
Was it?
20.3.
Thank you, I was looking at that.
Well, you're looking that up.
20.
How long did it take to do this report?
Yeah, so I started this, I'm gonna say early February. Now again, it's intermittent because you're doing your other daily tasks. But yeah, it takes a lot of information to compile. I mean, it takes a lot of time to compile the information. Hopefully this time the state uses this format and when we redo it in 3 years, we can carry over some of the information that hasn't happened in the last 2 or 3.
Dr. Cisneros, what did you find on Circle of Seasons?
1920. 20.3
For Circle of Seasons.
for Circle of Seasons.
So it's not that far out of the line. It's pretty similar.
Okay. Questions about the report? Do we take action on this? I think I have to start something.
So in 20, it'll go up for review for 28 days, and then we will look to approve this at the June 15th board meeting, and then we can sign and we'll submit all that information to the state for the July 22.
Okay.
Bill, it's a new system, so we're gonna try to figure out how we, if it's me that signs or I need to get you in, because it's another new system where you have to go on and sign. So,
Any questions? Comments? This is right up your alley there, Jen. Right, this is right up your alley.
Yeah, know all about it. Too
Okay,
much.
let's move on to the finance issues, items 5.03.
So 5.04 is the intergovernmental agreement for with Northwestern Lehigh and the IU. just a quick summary is, again, it's a routine item. The services that are outlined in there is will follow the special ed plan, their referral process, their special ed services, their site program, and their summer services, and their finances. Basically just outlines all the procedural details in relation to their services that they provide for us.
Routine,
Routine, yeah.
every year we do this. Comments, questions? 505.
5.05, if that's the notice of adoption of policies, again, that's a routine item. We retain this for auditing purpose. Mrs. Holman signs indicating we're following the IU adopted policies and procedures along with chapter 14 and all the IDA requirements.
Comments, questions? We're gonna see this next weekend.
Yeah.
Okay. 506.
506 is a TransPerfect agreement. This is an agreement with the IU, and we use this for consortium pricing for translation of IEP documents and all other all IDE documents that come in for students with IEPs. So another routine item. We've had this for the last four years, I believe.
It's as required. Comments, questions? Okay, move on to 509.
Yeah, so this is a speech contract for with ProCare. Ashley Benner, our secondary speech and language pathologist, resigned and went to a district closer to our home. And she was replaced by Erin Butterfield at the April 20th board meeting. And Erin won't be able to join us this school year because of her 60-day hold, so she'll start in the 22-23 school year. And that leaves us without speech services for the rest of the year. So this contract will provide services starting as early as we're able to get the person's HR documents in place with Mrs. Matika, and she will take over Mrs. Benner's schedule daily. In addition, we are working on a long-term substitute for the time that we missed with Ashley from April 19th until as soon as this person starts, which will give us about a 2.5 week addition. So that long-term substitute will make up all the speech services till the end of the school year.
So this is the one I mentioned to you on Friday that we would like to not delay even a week longer. If we could have your okay to execute this agreement as early as tomorrow, the person could begin as soon as they complete their HR related documents. If you're not comfortable with that, we certainly can wait till May 11th, but this was the one I put in your board report and said we would like the opportunity to execute this as early as tomorrow, get the person in place. There is only so much time left remaining at the end of the rest of the school year, and then bring this back retroactively for your formal approval at May 11th. If you are comfortable with that, I would appreciate that. If you are not, we will wait until May 11th.
Any objections? Oh.
Okay.
And the
Thank you.
$81 an hour is similar to.
Yeah, Mr. Delaker asked with salary and benefits, I would say that it's similar. Mrs. Edmonds and I did this figure before, not recently with the $81, but you have to remember our full-time individual would get salary and benefits. And Mrs. Edmonds has done the calculation of the remaining budgeted balanced salary that we have for Ashley, and using both of these services to be able to utilize that amount so that we are as close as possible. We might go slightly over, but it'll be very close between now and the end of the school year to hopefully fulfill. We're trying to create a situation where Erin Butterfield, who is the new hire, doesn't come in with a backlog now of speech services, that we try to get them taken care of with a substitute and or the person from now to the end of the year, so the students get speech services and don't have to either do them over the summer or get them made up at the beginning of next school year.
Okay, any questions for Andrew before she leaves? Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to the athletic participation report. We'll talk about those.
I believe Mr. Zimmerman is on the line about this athletic participation report.
Thank you, Mrs. Holman. Thank you, Mr. Delaker. Self-explanatory, my annual report I provide to the board. I was a little nervous this year, the impact COVID would have had on our participation numbers. And I'm happy to report, contrary to what other schools are experiencing, our participation numbers have returned to normal status. Just a few things of concern for me, and I bring this to your attention every year. This is the first year we didn't offer some levels of sport, okay? One of those levels was junior high girls basketball. That is a trend across the Colonial League. It used to just be Southern Lehigh, Bangor, and us that were able to offer that level. And all three of us were unable to this year. So we'll see how that looks with signups next year, but I'm not too confident we're going to offer that level in the future. And like I said, I believe that's going to be a league-wide decision, and we will conform. The other one is boys lacrosse. We did not offer a JV program this year. Coach Janda is working on that. I contacted the youth program. Their numbers are solid. So hopefully this is just a unique situation for us, and those numbers will continue to be fed to us by our youth program, who's doing a nice job. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is baseball for next year. The Colonial League is really looking at offering, rather than JV. We had a lot of teams that weren't able to field teams. They're looking to go to a junior high concept, which is very similar to softball. We will obviously comply with the Colonial League if that's a decision that they make. We could go either way. We could support one or the other, not both. So, we'll keep you posted in that regard for next year. And like I said, the Colonial League will drive that decision for us. Moving through the activities, very good numbers. Again, I brag in the area. We're always consistently at 85 to 90% of our student population is participating in something, whether that be an extracurricular, an athletic, or even an LCTI extracurricular program. So we're very proud of that. Very concerning to me, and it continues to be concerning to me, is the indoor twirling program. Some of you may remember several years ago, I brought a recommendation forth that we may need to reconsider offering this program. Some folks came out, showed their support, and the board directed me to work with the director to try and get those numbers back up. What we've done in the meantime is we've actually expanded to 7th graders and 8th graders to kind of get those numbers up. And as you can see, we have not had that much success. So again, just something that, I share with you, for future consideration. Barring any questions, which I'll be happy to entertain. This would be the slate that I'd also recommend for next year. And you can see in my note, I said with the understanding that JV baseball may change to a junior high baseball concept for next year.
Any questions for Jason? Okay, Jason, thank you for your report. I don't think we have any questions for you, and we'll receive this report in a week, next week.
Thank you, sir.
For putting it together. Moving into policy, we have no first readings. We have two policies under second reading. There's no comment?
No comment really, Mr. Delacour. There's no first readings tonight because we are engaging with PSBA. We have started that process now that the board has approved their policy review services. We're providing them all the information they need in order for them to put together a timeline for their full evaluation. With regard to second reading, those two items are still for your consideration this month. We haven't received no questions or comments on either of those policies.
Okay. Any comments this evening on those two policies? We will be taking action on next week. Is that right? Yes. Next week. Under operations, 4.01. LBHN services.
Can I ask Mr. Oaks to talk about this?
This is an agreement to jump on with the student athletes here at the school. And the main purpose for this agreement is for the bus drivers. We have to do a yearly physical for CDL requirements. There is some student services on there, but they need an extra evaluation. Past 4 or 5 years, as far as I know, we haven't used that service. But every year we use Northwest Medical for our bus driver physicals, and now Northwest Medical is part of the health network. So we have to amend the agreement as attached, and it was reviewed by Jess.
Okay, any questions? All right. We'll take action next week. 402. I think we have it. Nothing under there. So let's go to district finances. We'll begin with the proposed final budget. Here we go.
Stacy, will you allow me to have the remote?
Oh, I don't know about that.
guess. Allow me to have that.
Walk of luck.
All right. So tonight we're going to be reviewing our 22-23 proposed final budget. Changed a little bit since January. Changed a little bit since tonight, really, but let's, I guess, get into it. So these are our 2022-23 budget goals. I'm not going to review them again, but they've stayed the same throughout the year. So our timeline, just a reminder of where we're heading in this process. Tonight is our proposed budget presentation. Next week, the board will adopt the proposed final budget. At June workshop, we will continue with the discussion of our budget. And on June 15th, the board will vote on the final budget adoption. So moving on to the budget summary. So this budget looks slightly different than it did in January. The orange column in the middle is our proposed final budget, and as you can see to the right of it is our changes since January. So overall, our total budgetary expenditures decreased $481,000, and revenue increased $52,000 since January. This brought our shortfall down $533,000. So with a revised shortfall of $1.4 million, the bottom there, we'll see difference between in January, it was 1.9 million and we're now 1.4 million. So we're going to review each of these in a little bit more detail. Please stop me if you have questions too, because I tend to fly through this.
Hey, Ryan, I wanted to clarify as we go through here, the change from January, and you're looking at the proposed final budget, the orange, compared to the final budget of last year, not the actuals, correct?
What you see in that second column is the final budget of last year. And then January, what I presented in January.
Yeah, maybe I'm a slide too soon here, but
So the column that says change from January is the change from last budget. The last column is the change from 21.
Yeah, so building and departments, you'll see that January budget, it remained the same. So there is no change since January.
I'm sorry, I asked my question too soon. Let's wait till the next slide.
Can I just ask a quick question? What's the difference between proposed final budget adoption and final budget adoption? Like, what's the difference? What can happen in between that time frame? Like, why are we?
The state regulatory requirement that the budget get approved as a proposed final, and then it has to sit on display.
Okay.
Besides the $400,000 change you made earlier, typically there are no changes or very little or reductions only between proposed final and final.
Okay.
But it sits on display, comments. We will before next week hopefully make the change for the $400,000. So there's really nothing that you would anticipate changing between proposed final. It must sit on display with a board action and a board action at least. That's why your maybe board meeting is earlier, so that there's at least the right number of days. Is that what you're asking?
Yep.
And there will be additional changes as well. So our state property tax reduction that we use to fund our homestead, farmstead programs, the property tax relief that the homeowners get. We just recently got that, so we would be updating that for the final budget as well. Stacy, can you put the next slide, please?
Hold on. She took
I'm
your,
just gonna,
took it away.
Took
even
it
though
away.
she-
I'm gonna have to do it
Just pointing her.
right. Sorry.
All right, so our revenue overview. So our $47.3 million in revenues consists of $32 million in local sources, $13.9 million in state sources, and $1.2 million in federal sources. So overall, just minor changes in expected revenue at less than 1%. Our budget does not have any increase in basic education subsidy or special education subsidy. So we're budgeted at flat for those as of right now. So we don't know how much to expect from the state. It's likely that we'll receive some sort of increase. We don't know when that decision will be made or how much we'll get. So as of right now, for this proposed final budget, it's flat. Budget is flat. With the exception of the COVID-related grants, federal expenditures are flat as well as we update as we await updated title funding allocations. So the majority of our revenue, 68% is funded by local taxpayers, 30% is funded by the state, and 2% is federally funded. That 2% is federally funded revenue is actually a bit inflated. When you take out those temporary COVID grants, it actually drops to less than 1%. On the opposite extreme in the county, the Allentown School District receives 60% of its funding from state and 8% from the federal government. So the local taxpayers only fund 31% of their budget compared to Northwestern Lehigh at 68%. So that's a dramatic difference. So our notable changes in revenue, as far as the changes in revenue from 21-22, our real estate taxes have increased slightly based on assessment changes, less than 0.5%. Interim real estate taxes are budgeted down about 36%. So they've taken out previous COVID assumptions and adjustment based on historical trend. Our earned income tax continues to perform well, and we expect to budget 6.7% more than 21-22. And delinquent real estate taxes like interims are being adjusted back to historical trend. For our state sources of revenue, PSERS reimbursements is increasing just under 4% based on our salary increases. And for federal, these COVID grant the COVID grant adjustments are there, and we do not anticipate any other PCCD grant funding. So that is the adjustment with 100%. Moving on to our expenditures, building and the departments remain unchanged from January and have decreased 20,682, or just under 1% since the previous year. And that is the second year of reductions for the buildings and department budget. Salaries are expected to increase overall about 630,000 or 3.1%. Benefits are expected to increase about 559,000 or 4.8%. District-wide, we expect to decrease just slightly at 36,000 or 0.3%. So overall, our expenditures increased 2.3%. And as you can see in the second to last column, those increases come from salaries and benefits, which make up approximately 66% of our budget, like we mentioned earlier. So through the hard work of our staff and administration, we actually have brought back a number of students from charter schools. This has had a significant impact on our budget and has resulted in restoring back over $500,000. The LCTI budget as presented to the board in February increased $320,000 over the 21-22 school year. Oil, gas, and diesel have increased dramatically as we expected based on what's been going on in the world and the markets. So since this presentation has been created, we received the fuel bid results, as we'll see later on, and the bid price per gallon is actually slightly higher that we have than we anticipated in our proposed final budget. So we'll do minor adjustments for our final budget of that. But as a side note, the gas prices in the bid were actually significantly less than what we budgeted for. So if that proposed tank were to go through or was already installed, we would have great savings with that line item. Our debt service has increased about 1% has decreased about 1% due to the most recent financing. And we added about $100,000 worth of capital design costs based on moving forward with the projects at our last workshop. So we're going to kick it to Mrs. Holman to discuss staffing.
Can you ask a question quick? I'm just, the gas baffles me.
Gas is budgeted at $350 for 82,000 gallons. That's way different than
So
what it was.
21-22, the current school year, we budgeted 95,000. Next 2.
Yeah, the bid actually came in at 280. That is,
82, how many do we budget?
Yeah.
82,500,
say 2,000.
or 82,000.
Yeah, so the difference is we have budgeted 350 and the bid came in at 280. So it's not what we buy in bulk right now. We're anticipating higher costs. You know, that can change. But there is a dramatic difference between what we have in the budget.
Just looking at the difference between 21-22 and 22-23.
Well, but that's the composite of two things, right? I'd have to go back and see what Leslie had it budgeted at, but the addition of gas buses increased the gallons and the dollar figure.
Yep, it was the anticipation of more gas buses.
2 buses, 3 buses?
We went from 6 to 9 in gas, I'm looking at you.
No, we actually have 7. 3 of them are micros and 5 of them.
Yeah. We'd have to go back and look at what it was budgeted at last year and what the gallons were last year.
And is it COVID because we didn't budget a lot because we knew we weren't busing the way or something just.
Well, in the actual.
It's a 204% increase.
The 2021 for sure was a COVID.
We weren't driving.
The COVID was so the actual you're looking at is a COVID impact. I don't believe Leslie took any impact in the 21-22 anticipating COVID. So your $43,000 actual is a COVID impact year.
Ryan would have to go back to 19-20.
Or 18-19. Because your 19-20 school year, you only bus till March. So you gotta remember your
Yeah, we
19,
weren't busing on Wednesday.
but that's 2021, but even the year before, you only bused until March.
And COVID shut down.
So your last actual full year was 18-19, where you did a full regular bus. We can start, when I go through my slides, potentially Ryan might, I don't remember how many gallons or what dollar figure Leslie budgeted last year. I don't know if that's quickly.
For last year, for 2020, for 21-22.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's no formula in here. I just know it was 82,000 gallons. I think Troy did the math at $1.15 a gallon. So dramatic difference.
I mean, the same things you're seeing in gas, diesel, and is the same things we're seeing in terms of, I mean, I know you're reacting with the 400%, but all three of those.
Gas prices didn't rise 204%. That's why.
We were paying $199.
And you gotta remember, $199 is what you're paying,
And the tax,
we take the tax off, right?
we take the tax off, but the tax is a flat fee in Pennsylvania. It's not a percentage.
I believe it is a percentage.
Yeah,
I'll
but
double
you
check
just-
for you.
I thought tax was, because the cost of the fuel might be up higher than, I thought tax was only like 42 cents or 48. It's a 48.
I don't know. if it's
I don't
flat.
think it's a percentage, so I think the cost of the actual fuel that we would see would be a lot higher. Yeah, because of that.
You gotta figure $1.15 to $3.50, which is what we're budgeting now.
That, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking gas at the pump because we were buying fuel at gas at the pumps. That's why.
Well, but you still don't pay the
They
tax.
get-
So even though we pay at the pump, you still don't pay the tax. So when Todd's saying it was $1.99, if that's correct, you're still gonna take, even though we pay at the pump, you still take the 48 cents off, you just don't pay it. So $1.15 might have been close to right when it was $1.99 minus the tax. We pay at the pump regardless. You don't pay tax at the pump and you don't pay tax if we got it delivered. Ryan's comment about what it was, the bid amount, we would be able to sure that in today.
Right.
So I think the reaction to, we're putting in 350 thinking, we're gonna have to pay whatever it is at the pump minus the tax. Versus if you had a tank to take it, you could lock in at the 280, what was the 280 was? 280 something. I had it in your board report.
It was 280.
Ryan, can you actually come up with a number of if we had a tank and we base it on the bid price that you just got at 280, what that savings would be versus what we would potentially average out our budget on if we were doing 350? I'm just curious what the number would be.
Yeah, it's 64, when we did it, was 64 cents a gallon times 82 gallons. 82,000 gallons, excuse me.
Well, we probably don't take, up to 57,000.
You're not gonna take more than you budget in a year, so you're gonna take at most next year 82,000 gallons times the differential of 64 cents.
Yeah, if you take 82,000 times that 280, it's 229,000.
60 grand.
So that tank pays for itself, well, it's not pays for itself.
That's half of it.
That's what I was
In 2
asking,
years,
yeah.
in 2 years, it may.
In 2
if-
years,
if-
that's
if-
different than-
if
It all
it's the same
remains the
equal,
same, we don't know what gas is
If
gonna
it
be like
was
next
step
year.
knowledge, yeah.
Correct, but you cover 50% of it in year one.
In 1
Right.
year, that's what I was.
Yeah. Any additional questions for everyone staffing?
Oh, the gas tax was a flat rate. Was again 57 cents. It wasn't.
You're right, good staff, go Todd. Okay, the next couple slides, these are the same budget slides that we put in the budget every year about staffing. The staff have been notified of all of the changes that we're recommending pending your approval tonight before this went live on Friday. This is a very similar chart to what we've given you in the past. The left side has the grades and the numbers in parentheses are your class size guidelines. So they can be changed, but right now there are guidelines in school board policy that have the things that should guide us. They are not a rule. We have gone over and under them in the past based on the things Mrs. Edmonds talked about earlier, the composite of the class, the group of students. But for kindergarten, for example, the class sizes are supposed to be according to board policy between 17 and 22. I did highlight the 3 anomalies that we are currently watching. The asterisk number, obviously kindergarten, we're going to have more than this, but it's what it is as of April. Enrollment, kindergarten to date at Northwestern Elementary is 58. The next column is if that number of students in that grade are divided by the number of sections we're recommending, how many students would be in each classes. They're not even, they don't divide evenly all of the time. But for example, 58 students at Northwestern Elementary divided by 3 sections of kindergarten at Northwestern Elementary would be class sizes of 19 and 20. We are not recommending a change at Northwestern Elementary in that grade at this time. If you flow over to Weisenberg, Weisenberg is running at 47 currently. That's one obviously we're watching because they, with 3 sections would be under the class size guidelines in terms of if they keep that number of students. Right now, we're not recommending a change, but we've made a change in that grade as late as August. You will see if you flow through first grade, second, third, and fourth, the class sizes, 60, 68, 70, 71. Obviously, these are significantly smaller. These are the small class sizes that have gone through all of our elementary grades at this point. That run class sizes, which for all of those grades are within the class size guidelines. You will see us make a change, moving that low class of 60 to 5th grade, continuing, our recommendation continues to be 2 sections in each of our elementary schools. So there is no net change in the number of sections, but there will be 3 sections recommended in 4th grade next year to have the 70 students at Northwestern Elementary and the 67 students at Weisenberg, and the 60 students and the 57 students in 5th grade divisible by 2 sections, and that's just a move of a teacher. You'll see Northwestern Elementary total, again, with the kindergarten enrollment is 387, Weisenberg is 365. So there is, at this time, no net change in the number of sections that we are recommending at the elementary school. Any questions before?
I have a question. So I'm looking at this right. 4th grade next year. This is next year's numbers, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's, at Northwestern Elementary, there's 71 students in 3
Correct.
4th grade sections total.
Correct.
But 60 students in 2 sections of 5th grade.
Those 60 students are in 4th grade now, they're going to 5th grade next year. That was the reduction. So if you recall, in the $1 million worth of changes last year, we reduced 2 elementary teachers. They are this year's current 4th grade, which will be next year's current 5th grade. So those were the lowest sections and the only ones that were with any level of numbers divisible by 2. So if you look at the number, for example, 71, and you would divide that by 2, you would be doing 35s and 36s. So the only opportunity you had to do any reduction of teachers and class size increase was that grade. And they are outside the class size guidelines in both schools in that grade.
Yep. Yeah, I remember. Thanks.
So when that, so that'll be 5th grade next year, the 60 and 57.
That is correct.
So that's 117.
That is correct.
So, but following them is 138. Yeah. So you really, 117 makes sense to make changes in the middle school, but we're following them right behind is 138, which makes it hard to.
Yeah, the class, if you recall, there's a couple bubbles. So you have graduating classes. I should put my own presentation. You have graduating classes that are 169, 170, 182. When you're looking at your classes, you have classes that have come in as low as 114. Okay, that's where some of these reductions in the sections are coming from. And so that class right now, if you flip to the next slide, you will see the distinct difference between what will be next year's 7th grade and what is next year's 8th grade. So that class came into 6th grade last year, we made a reduction.
Yeah.
That class is moving to 7th grade, we made a reduction. And then we also last year, if you recall, made a reduction in the related arts. We
Right,
removed
which,
computers last year.
which makes sense. Just that 117 with 6 sections, when they hit 6th grade, those class sizes are gonna be small.
Yeah, yes, that's why you have to look at is there opportunities to do continual reductions in the middle school when the class sizes go to the middle school? As we have done with 6th grade and 7th grade with those low class sizes, because right now, even in 6th grade currently, you're running sections of 23, 24, and 25 that are smaller than your current 5th grade sections. The difficult part in middle school is twofold. One, they are teamed in 2 separate teams. And the second is subject to areas specialty certifications. So you need to make sure in the middle school, the people that you have in the classes are certified to teach the courses, whereas elementary are K-6 certified.
Can you just talk a little bit about the makeup of the 5th grade class, incoming 5th grade class? So when you talk special ed, you talk gifted, you talk ESOL, you talk the differentiated supports that would support that classroom, what that would look like.
Sure. So when we made the reduction, the elementary principals and I sat down and made some changes to who taught what classes. And so because of some of the composite and needs that are in the current 4th grade, what will be 5th grade class, we did divide up them into 3 sections for certain subjects like teaching math. So our reading specialist and/or an MTSS member is teaching math, so they're divisible by 3 in those subjects, as well as added additional aid support for those groups. It does not mean that there are not times, there are certainly 30 students in one classroom, and they are also 30 students for reading and other specials throughout the day. We tried to add additional support to them, but there are 30 students in that classroom.
That's a lot, just the bodies in a room who have varying needs. And so I was curious what that looks like in terms of, is it a push in, pull out model in terms of supports, you know, whether it's gifted or that's what I'm kind of asking, because that could, the number of adults that in the room, depending on the level of needs.
Yes, it's all of the above. So there are certain students that have special education needs that are pulled out of the classroom, but there are certainly students who are pushed in, and the aid support, yes, adds additional adults in the classroom as well. There are students with varying needs, just like there are in any other grade level. So there are gifted students, there are special education students, there are EL students across the grades.
Yeah, I'm just asking because the difference between 23 and 30 is significant.
You are correct.
Absolutely. That's why I'm asking, when you add all those other bodies in there, there's not a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah, but when they jump one more grade with 6 sections at 6th grade, now they're only 19 in the class.
Agreed. Yeah, yeah.
That's why I'm not saying, I'm saying you don't get caught looking at it with 117 in that class and like I'm telling you. Okay.
You have to go.
What I'm thinking is you can't say, okay, now we can make our cuts or cuts can be made because following them, you're jumping right back to
Yeah,
138.
that's the dilemma, right? Is Can you make a cut for a 1 year period, knowing
You
you're gonna have
can't,
to?
yeah.
But to that point, you're looking at middle school, you're probably gonna have to add a teacher in elementary school. Because right behind it is that bigger section, which would require 3 as well, so.
Yeah, I think it's a larger conversation, and I think Mr. Lizer said it at one of the meetings about your comfortability with class sizes, and I agree with Mrs. Cenovitis. 23 to 30 is a distinct difference. But the question was also asked earlier, what are we doing to decrease the revenue or increase the revenues or decrease the expenditures? And when 66% of your budget is staff and it went up $1.1 million this year for all the very good reasons, these are the decisions that you have to make. You don't get millions of dollars out of pencils and paper, even if I don't give them any. You just don't.
And what's the prediction of enrollment? So as new come, some leave, what does that average out?
So we're coming in in kindergarten, we're supposed to be at, I think, 122 for kindergarten coming in next year, according to what was the Decision Insight study we had done 2 years ago. But if you recall, over time, that was predicted to drop 118, I mean, I could certainly get you the entire study. It's probably actually in your master's facility binder, the entire study by year, only knowing that is only good at most 5 years out, because they are only counting the students that were born at the time, like as the 4-year-old, the 3-year-old, the 2-year-old.
Yeah, I was more asking about the incoming grade 5. So what happens at Northwestern when you have 5 new students?
Yeah.
And now you have a class of 35.
Well, we've got new students this year. So last year at this time, that was anticipated to be 29 and it went to 30. Weisenberg was anticipated to be 27, like the slides I had last year, same thing. And it's 28, 29, and Jill just told me I have 59 now. And I went, well, these are April 1st, so they constantly change. Yeah, we've gone as high at one point this year as 31 in one of those classes without adding a teacher. Do you want me to move forward to middle school? Okay, so middle school's on your next slide. Same slide set up your 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Your class size guidelines are a little different, 20 to 26. You will see your lower class sizes now are into 7th grade, that 145, 140. Running class sizes, and again, they're not all even either. This is divisible straight at 24 and 25. You will see our one reduction recommendation in 7th grade. Which I will detail on the next slide. 8th grade is still at 164. That 140 obviously will go to 160. 140 will go to 8th grade next year. This is what I meant earlier. When you go to high school and those class sizes come in, that 1 year is not going to have any significant reductions because they're cross grade level courses in most cases. Do note, same thing for related arts, because we did reduce a related arts teacher last year, that 8th grade will be at 27s and 28s for related arts, because last year our reductions, if you recall, were the 2 elementaries, replacing the middle school FCS with an existing staff member, eliminating a 6th grade teacher, replacing the high school business retirement with an existing staff member from the middle school, and eliminating middle school computers as a related arts offering, as well as a high school teacher, 2 secretaries, and a reduction of a food service individual were our 9 reductions of staff last year. 449 is the number at the middle school coming in for next year, with 1 recommended reduction in 7th grade. You flip to the last slide. The summary of professional staff recommendations for 22-23. Obviously continue to watch our kindergarten enrollment. To Mrs. Cenovitis' point about 5th grade, I don't know how you would add 1. You'd almost have to add 2, or you'd have to do something else divisible if you decided you wanted to do something with 5th grade. And obviously that's not budgeted for in the current budget. And when we eliminated that, it was about $270,000 for those 2 teachers. It's one of the things that would be easier if you divided by the entire grade level. You could run 5 sections and kind of keep the number low. I don't know how you would choose one school or transfer students mandatorily. But we'll continue to watch the kindergarten numbers. Same thing, we have moved students in kindergarten from one school to another and told people when they register, they don't necessarily always get exactly, but that is a trend that we follow through. We allow those students to continue to go to school in that school. We are recommending the reduction of 1 7th grade teacher due to the enrollment decline. We've tried to keep up, I messaged Bill at one point, there's another local district that I'm not sure has kept up with the enrollment decline and is looking at 40 furloughs this year and 30 early retirements. It's not a situation we wish to be in. So as we have decreasing enrollment, unfortunately, the tough decisions are you need to keep up with the enrollment decline, but that means professional staff recommendations. We would like to continue to use ESSER. As you recall from our ESSER funding, this is the funding that is related to COVID learning loss. We did fund 1 social worker, 3 part-time interventionists, and 1 student services teacher. We would like to continue to do that through 22-23. In Mr. Kish's presentation, he will detail that there is a portion that is about $300,000 towards staffing for ESSER. We also added this year due to an increased ELL need, 40% ELL teacher for ELL students for 22-23. We'll also fund that out of ESSER money. That is something we have in place from about halfway through this year when we had an increased need that we discussed with the board. English language learner, formerly called ESL, but ELL is English language learner. And it's the position, if you recall, we came to with an increased need halfway, maybe a little more than halfway through the year, and asked for permission to add a 40% person. We did last year eliminate gifted support in the middle school with the move to family consumer science we mentioned. We do see a need that we would like to support the caseload at the middle school by adding 16% to one of our gifted folks. We did have a person in that position, which we eliminated last year. After talking with Mr. DeVico in detail this year, the students really need a level of support in the middle school for gifted that person will be able to do for next year. And we also are recommending adding a special education teacher. As we discussed with the board, our special education numbers have increased, particularly at the high school, and particularly in the class of 8th grade coming down to the high school. And so we are recommending adding a special education teacher at the high school. Any questions on the recommendations? More details on the special ed numbers, I do have them. So. And all of those changes are incorporated into Mr. Kish's next few slides that discuss salary and benefits, but I'm certainly obviously available for any questions as we go through them. Mr. Kish, turn it back over to you.
All right, so overall, our salaries have increased 629,000 or 3.1%. So since the district last went through the budget process in 21-22, there's been a number of employee status changes as well as anticipated changes in the 22-23 budget. So that's what gives us a proposed final budget numbers. Overall, professionals saw a 3.3% increase with support at 2.7 and administrative at 2.9. For our benefits, after adjusting for the previous year employment status changes, medical settled just at under 9%. Dental is down 11,000, but prescription is up 24,000. So we're hopeful that these large jumps in medical and prescription are temporary COVID bumps and not part of a new normal and elevated healthcare costs. Social Security is also up with payroll, and PSERS rates have increased to 35.26 from 34.94% last year. 10 years ago, the PSERS contribution rate was just over 12%.
You didn't have to do the math on what that is on an annual basis.
Nope, I can put that as part of the final presentation if you would like some more piece. Absolutely. So the district has the ability to raise the taxes 3.4%, which is the maximum allowable increase under Act 1. This equates to a 0.6030 mil increase has a budgetary impact of just over $1 million and would cost the average taxpayer an additional $133 a year. So while every school and community has different challenges in comparison to other districts in the county, Northwestern Lehigh has the third lowest tax rate, currently just behind Southern Lehigh and Parkland. This slide is simply just a visual of your millage rate since the 13-14 school year. 7 years of no tax increases and 5 that you can see on the screen there. So for these next slides, there are a few assumptions I made, that had to be made for projecting out the next 5 years, but I think it's a great visual to show just what stagnant revenues and increasing expenditures without tax increases. The budget gap continues to get larger and larger. So our budget gap in 26-27 could be as large as $5.7 million. I'm sorry, $5.2 million. Thank you. So on the other hand, if you add the yearly index or 3% increases, your revenues keep pace with your rise in expenditures, keeping the budget gap to a more manageable level. This model shows a $1.7 million budget gap, which is still a lot, but we were able to manage it better with budget cuts and fund balance to better bridge that gap. So our general fund balance here since 2011 and how the district has trended over the years, reaching its peak in 2015, and our current estimates are shown in 22 and 23. So our increase in expenditures and stagnant revenues without tax increases will force the district to quickly deplete our fund balance, and that's what that graph is there.
Without tax increases over the next several years, Ryan? Yeah.
Yep. So that's if we don't increase taxes at all the next several years. That's with the 0 moving forward. And with index tax increases on the next slide, or 3%, the district can preserve that fund balance much longer. Also, please keep in mind that these are based off budgeted numbers. We've been lucky the last few years that we've been able to put back a surplus. So those numbers will obviously change, and so will the graph. If it was a deficit like we project in the budget. So our total proposed use of fund balance for the 22-23 school year is just over $1.4 million and consists of the following designations: scholarships at $15,000, Mays Bond Pool at $200,000, OPEB at $50,000, PSERS at $365,000, energy at $73,000, senior tax rebate, which we'll talk about a little bit later on after the presentation, is at $30,000, fleet replacements $100,000, capital projects $100,000, athletic club funds $5,000, curriculum $100,000, budgetary reserve $400,000. And those capital projects, that is new since January, and that is your design fees that we added. We move forward with the last meeting. So overall, 1.4 million is a total proposed use of fund balance.
What do we make on fund balance?
As far as interest,
Yeah.
I can look that up for you and let you know.
500, 560.
Only the ones you have in bond, in CDs.
It's peanuts right now. Hopefully, it goes up more. With the
Only
rise
the
in
things you have
rates.
locked in CDs.
CDs are like 2.
We don't have much left in CDs.
And we freed up the last 5 million CD because it wasn't giving me any interest.
So we budget about 250,000 earnings on investment. Hopefully, we see a little more following year.
But remember, if we don't use this, it goes back into fund balance.
Yep.
That's 1.4.
So bringing this all together, the proposed budget has revenues totaling 47.3 million, expenditures totaling 49.7, giving us a $2.4 million shortfall. The proposed tax increase would generate a little over $1 million, bringing our shortfall down to 1.4 million, which would be offset with the district fund balance. That's all I have. So open up to any questions or comments.
Nice job, Ryan.
So for next week, you'll bake in somewhere in here, where will that go, the buildings and departments? We call it out separately, the 400 and whatever we said.
Yeah, we can put it in building departments, and then you'll see fund balance of 400,000 out of our capital projects as well. And that'll be for the 1 year. if we move forward with the projects the following year, so we just pay that a regular debt service budgeted.
And between now and then, Ryan, I'm also gonna look at the gas diesel, not because of what you mentioned, but because remember, we're budgeting at 3 and it came in higher than 3. And so we want to see gallon usage wise, do we need to increase anything with that? Because the bid came in higher than what we have currently built into the budget on Monday or Tuesday, whatever day I told you it came in.
Do you know what the history has been on budgetary reserve? Yeah,
We've never,
400,000.
in my recollection here, for the last 12 years, we've never used budgetary reserve.
Yeah, and we have $400,000 in there coming out of fund balance. That's part of the 1.4.
For unanticipated expenses,
Yeah.
emergencies,
Yeah.
things come in
And,
higher than normal.
We have it so we can use it.
Right.
Yeah,
If
the
we didn't
only-
have it, we wouldn't budget that, but it's there as a.
If we don't use it, it just goes.
It just goes right back in.
Yeah,
The
it's a
only
safety
year,
It'll go right back.
the only year we talked about the potential to have to use it was the year with the mold, when it was $250,000 or so. Besides that, I don't think we've ever had to use it.
So we have the luxury of having that fund balance so that we can use it to balance the budget in this way, but in other cases, we're not using it. And the general operating budget gets underspent usually every year. So
Yeah, it's hard to budget right on the money with a $50 million budget, so
Yeah.
we'd rather have a surplus a little bit than a deficit.
I mean, we're within 1% on the revenues, but the expenditures, budget conservatively, but you've been underspending that your departments and yeah, and that budgetary reserve of 400,000 is one example of that.
I think from the overall perspective, we kind of have to look at the next 5-year period
Yeah,
and say, all right, we've got, call it $1 million in a TIF coming in, what do we say, 9 years from now? What the number was now?
20,
9 years from now, you're gonna have some tax increases happening here in a pretty steady clip, presumably, unless we figure out how to cut or bring in millions of dollars in fees. So and then you have the debt refinancing potential. Even if we decide to move forward with, say, a $10 million or $14 million bond or refinance, that is going to be, Todd and I are whispering each other, but I mean, the reality is even at whatever the rate is now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we'll probably be refinancing that debt if all things go the way they've gone over the last 6
either
or 8 years.
refinancing, get money back,
Or
or say, I'm
restructure.
glad we did that when we did.
Restructuring and there's probably not, even though you look at the numbers now and you say, okay, 12 years from now, 13 years, whatever that number was, we don't have any debt. There's going to be debt, right? There's gonna be roofs, there's gonna be big projects that come along, so. But this 5-year period here is kind of an important planning period for us, because if we don't decrease taxes, for example, right, we run that fund balance to 0. So I don't think anybody wants to be there.
If we go back to that slide 18, that kind of summarizes what you've been saying, and the tax increase every year is, we're at the average of what, 4,000 now? Every year it's going up 130 for the average, $133, $150 for the average taxpayer. But if we didn't do it, we go up to the next slide where we have that gap of $5 million at the end of 5 years. But, and we talked about the 7 years of no taxes. And while that was happening, the millage didn't go up, but the assessed value of the area went up. So we had that assessed value grow that the millage is applied to. And, had we had tax increases during those years, we'd be at a higher rate right now for that average. It wouldn't be 4,000, it'd be
For 7 years,
$4,500 or $4,800.
7 years of no tax increases was about $4 million 5-year base.
Although the assessed value did continue to grow with those warehouses.
And you also got transfer tax on the warehouse.
Hopefully that's not ended. But we're running out land.
The other thing to note, Mr. Deloker mentioned the $400,000 in unassigned. The other one is your Emmaus bond pool is in here as well, which we have not historically used, but that was from Scott talked on the screen, the 2 columns of your debt, that's variable rate debt. The Emmaus, they're called the Emmaus bond pool, and if you look on the screen with your fund balance, that Emmaus bond pool where we lock 200,000 is in case that debt the variation in the interest rate goes beyond, that's where that's comes from. Otherwise, that will also, and has historically, for the most part, rolled back in as well. So you have to budget something because you don't have that rate locked in on those two, which has historically been to our favor.
That's gonna go the other way.
It has historically been to our favor, but yes, that's something to watch your interest rate on. Because they're variable rate debt on, and that they're those first 2 columns that Scott talked about in his presentation.
Yeah, how much longer do we have in that?
Yeah, it's in that booklet. The first 2
That's the only
columns,
variable.
there's 2 advanced fund flows, yeah.
First
So-
one ends in, okay.
Go ahead, you got
First
it.
one ends in 2024, and then your 2009 one ends in 2030.
Okay, 2030 is
Magic year.
magic year when TIF expires. Okay, any questions?
Hey, food for thought. 5 years ago, our proposed final budget had a $1.8 million shortfall. So we put it into perspective.
After the end of, at the end of the budget, we took 1.8 out of fund balance.
Yep. May 3rd, 19 or 2000.
Good job.
So 2017-18 budget, we were a shortfall of $1.8 million. And we used fund balance.
But I tell Bill this every year when we talk about the rainy day fund or the scenario. You budget to the best of your ability, but things change between, so that 5-year projection is what it looks like today with a lot of assumptions built in. But you have lots of staff that are retiring and replacing, programs change, things change over time that change that prediction as early as tomorrow. And so that's what it looks like today with all of the current composite of staff. That's never going to be the case 5 years from now. There's lots and lots, as we know, that change over that time. And we have taken the opportunity when we can to make reductions, and that's what's made those changes. Even though we didn't raise taxes, you're still about the same amount year over year. You're taking out of fund balance this year slightly less.
Yeah, I was just hoping that would maybe put some people at ease. But this isn't uncharted territory, so we've been here before. 5 years later, we're still there and,
Been here forever.
yeah.
Used to have a
John,
fund
you don't
balance.
feel at ease.
It's really looking at.
Hey, you were here then, you were here 5 years ago.
I kind of like the balance a little bit.
We used to have a fund balance, a negative fund balance, with $400,000 in the hole.
That's way
Back in the
pretty
80s.
But it's tough, you decreased district-wide the last 2 years, you decreased your building and departments the last 2 years. These increases are salaries and benefits. So.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard, unless you have some big commercial base. I think a lot of school districts, I mean, this isn't, I hate to say a new normal, but the days of 0 tax increases, unless you're partnering with a bigger commercial base, it's much harder to do.
And unless you live with this and you look at it year after year after year, you just can't go to the public in a soundbite and explain, why spending, why taxes are going up. You can't just cut your way down to a 0 tax increase. Any other comments or questions about the budget? Thank you for the making the complex easy to understand.
Try to make it as painless as possible and as short as I can.
It's a lot of effort. It's a constant battle to try to pull this together. Thank you. All right, let's move on to, let's see, we're at general obligation bonds.
This is what Scott talked about. This is the resolution that for our next board meeting with the bonds. I don't know if you have any questions on it. He kind of went over it, most of it. Moving forward, there's gonna be a lot of paperwork to sign for the president and our board secretary.
Yeah, so we're gonna see this come back, see June first, right?
Well, you'll see this May 11th.
We're gonna see this May 11th.
Yeah.
It's like, you just said, no, are you gonna refuse to sign?
Okay, we'll take action on that next week. Fuel bid, you wanna talk about the fuel bid some more?
Brian, let's talk about the other.
Sure, we got notice of our fuel bid numbers, what was it, Tuesday? A little bit higher than we anticipated. Diesel at 331 and fuel oil at 316. In the past, you've seen a spreadsheet with the rates. The rates on the spreadsheet that they gave us to lock in, by the time I locked in on them the same day, they said they have increased. So they weren't even staying true to their bidding. So it's about the same as what the bid came in, but they're not staying level, they're rising. So that's why we asked to lock in so early. So if we would have waited till tonight or next week, they would have gone up despite what was shown on the bid sheet.
So we are going to take retroactive approval on this next week.
Yep, with petroleum traders.
Any questions on that? And this is what we do every year on this fuel. You know, you gotta make a decision right now and then lock it in and then take retroactive.
Doesn't make sense that you would bid it something out, they'd give you a rate, and then the very next day, they would say, I mean, in this climate, I guess we have no choice.
Okay, we can move down to 5.07. This is the legal counsel consortium. I think this is an annual routine, isn't it?
And I found Mr. Delaware, it is an annual item for us to engage with the CLIU, technology and council, or excuse me, technology and education legal counsel consortium. Mark Walls is an attorney with Sweet Stevens and Kathy, provides a lot of great insight to the district and updates related to technology, education technology challenges that are being seen throughout our community. It's been very valuable to us. We're asking for your approval to do it again for next year.
Any questions on this routine item every year? Then we'll move to 508. That's another recurring approval we do annually, and that's the dual enrollment with LFIC.
Just a routine agreement with L-Tri-C that allows our students to take college courses.
Which is at some expense to us too.
No, there's no cost to us. It's a reduced cost for the student. I don't believe there's any cost to us for dual enrollment. Oh, well, we reimburse, well,
That's a separate.
it is separate, but that's for not just L-Tri-C. So you have previously, I think we stopped that a year or two ago. There was $7,500. You had previously built into the budget for reimbursements per credit for dual enrollment. That was not in last year's and it's not in current years. But there's no cost to us for dual enrollment besides if you had choose to do something like that.
So we'll take action on that next week. Another routine. Skipping down to 510, summer camp.
I'll take this one. The flyers are in your executive content because this is an invitation only camp. So just this more notice in terms of our ESSER dollars. If you recall from our presentation that Leslie and Leanne did, there is a portion of your ESSER dollars that you must spend on after school camps, and there's a portion of your ESSER dollars you must spend on summer camps. The dollars are specifically for students with demonstrated learning loss. And so we are again offering summer camp when our elementary and middle school. Again, students are in the process right now of being invited if they are students who their data suggests that they would benefit from the camps. New this year, we are going to partner with L-Tri-C for a program called SHINE, which is normally in many other school districts, a program that is funded through a federal grant. If you have such a percentage of low reduced percentage and it's after school, they're going to do that for us at our elementary schools. And then we are again going to partner with 2 camps in the afternoon. So there will be 2-week camps for elementary and middle school students. We anticipate 72 students at elementary and 24 students at middle school. And middle school, again, is going to partner with Camp LCTI for one of their weeks when they already offer a camp at LCTI. And so middle school, I believe, already has some students registered, and elementary is beginning that process now. So just as you see them come through, there will obviously be agreements and payments executed to run those summer camps. The flyers that go out to the parents are in your executive content if you wish to see them.
So this is funded partially, at least by ESSER?
It is
By
funded
COVID money?
entirely by ESSER.
Okay. Good use of that.
And there's no busing. Do we bus?
We have bus to LCTI. We haven't bused to here. So when the students, if they need a ride up to LCTI, the form does ask if they need transportation.
Come here and then.
They come here. Well, and actually they had so few students who needed transportation last year. I think we actually picked them up.
Okay, any other questions on summer camp? Then we'll go to Chester County Joint Purchasing Agreement, and I think that's new, isn't it? For Apple
We
products?
did it one time before, but Dr. Stonehoff will talk about it too.
Yeah, it is new in terms of this resolution, but we have used Chester County for purchasing in the past. The district participates in a number of statewide cooperative purchasing programs such as CoStars or PEPA, maybe those are terms that you may be familiar with, to get competitive pricing and also to meet our bidding requirements. The CCIU has a joint purchasing board that's similar to that, where we can get competitive pricing for certain things, in this case, Apple products. And so we've used this in the past, used them in the past when we had to replace our teacher devices that exceed the bidding threshold. Now, when we're, have to replace them again now in the current future, they're requiring this resolution in order for us to participate in that. So we're asking you to please approve this resolution so we can use this consortium competitive pricing.
Questions? Take action in next week. Reports, anything you wanna go on the reports for us?
Nothing fancy, bunch of subsidies rolling in the month of March, retirement, special ed, transportation, and our rental reimbursement. Just keep pointing out our earned income tax rate since March 2021, we're still ahead 4.4% compared to this time last year.
Any question on the reports?
Is that annual, sorry, I was looking at the, compared to the reports, the subsidy teasers.
What you see on the recap is what we received for that month. So you see retirement subsidy, we received 974,000 for that month.
This is current year revenue, so is that, so that's just a month.
Correct.
Does that come in?
So the time to the percent of what? Retirements?
Teacher's cost.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 7 million P's comes back.
And so, as does Social Security, right?
Correct.
All right, any questions on the reports? We do have financial information not requiring action, and that's just a update on the senior citizens tax rebate.
Actually, I have a question.
So as you already know, or may already know, the district operates a senior citizen tax rebate program. And that program mirrors the state program as far as eligibility. All those forms are on the district's website. So it's my understanding that when the program was first implemented here, King Spry provided guidance stating that the school districts do not have legal authority to create property tax exemptions such as this one. So despite that guidance, does the district want to continue with this moving forward? And that was budgeted for as part of our fund balance.
Talk about it every year and see if it's something you want to continue. or not.
Yeah. So let's just lay this on the table. This is what we're talking about as being unconstitutional redistribution of wealth by requiring senior citizens that fall into the category of income to have to pay their taxes, they get a rebate, but it would be at the expense of everybody else that's paying taxes because they'd have to pay the difference. And that's why it was, that's why King's Pride ruled against it, but the board at that time voted to put it in. Just for edification, how many do we have and how much does it cost?
It's about $30,000. I used to give you, as they came in, reports of how many we get, but $30,000 is the max we've ever gotten in a given year.
That we ever had to pay out to cover this cost. And these are senior citizens on a low income. I don't remember what the criteria was, but it follows the state rebate for taxes. And the way the state gets around the constitutionality is because they finance it using lottery money. Isn't it lottery money? Or some kind of a.
Gaming goes to Homestead Farm.
There's something that they
Supplement it with, I don't know what that is.
So, but we don't have the ability to supplement it, so all we do is say, we're gonna require these people to pay less, these people are gonna cover that cost. So that's a board decision we take every year. If you don't do it, there'll be some criticism for that $30,000. I don't know if it's, you have the appetite to create that kind of turmoil in the district with the seniors who are eligible for this.
When we started it, did the attorney say that information, or is this recent information from the attorney?
That was when it started, I pulled documents.
When it was started, that was known to the board that voted to start this. And it's like any giveaway program that you start, once you have it.
It's hard to take it
hard
back.
to take it back. And if we do take it back, there'll be a lot of screaming. So every year, I guess we look at this and say, you want to continue
I
it?
mean, right now it's built into your fund balance. It was one of the fund balance sides, the $30,000 anticipated revenue. If you wish to continue it, the paperwork's ready to go. We just need affirmation that you wish to continue the senior citizen tax rebate program for 22-23.
Actually, I think in my opinion, my personal opinion, the only way you're gonna end this is if somebody would sue the school for doing something that's not constitutional, and then.
The other option would be to come up with a slower progression. We cut it in half again, rather than 1 year saying, you know.
Just changing criteria or something.
Are new people added? Or
Yeah,
is
it's
it just?
open, it's open for applications every year. Whenever you open it up, you open up applications. Mr. Kish might have it on his screen. He can read it to you. They have to apply every year and they have to meet the qualifiers every year. I believe it is senior citizens and permanent disability, if I'm not mistaken, and then they apply. So yes, our estimate is based on our history of how many people have applied, but yes, any given year, more people can apply for it if they fall into one of those two categories.
Do you have an average of what's paid out? I mean, I don't think we're giving out thousands to any one individual.
Well, I mean, I
think
have the
it's just a
last,
small dollar.
this is October of 19. I gave you a report, October board meeting, we have refunded 19,000 and that is 64 applicants. So I don't, you can reverse, I did the math quick. So it was 64 applications for $19,814.
Yeah, so it's $300 on average per applicant.
Well, that was.
That was that 1 year.
Yeah, I just happened to search because I used to get the board reports that said we have 64 applicants and 19,000 because the board at the one time wanted to watch. Yeah, it's budgetary.
All right.
I'm all right with keeping it. I was around when it started. I was opposed to it. But it's, yeah, it's just one of those, like, you know, once we implement it, it's, yeah.
Yeah, but what's the fallback? So somebody comes here and gets annoyed. People get annoyed at everything we talk about. I mean, I'm just saying, like, if it's not one issue, it's another. People, there's always somebody that's upset.
So,
I mean, it is a discriminatory practice, right? We are knowingly discriminating against
My
younger
question,
people.
Mike, I agree with you on that, and I'm okay with the 30,000. The problem I see is if somebody decides to sue us, what is that gonna cost us in attorney fees to defend it? And then what do we do? And that's a question for the attorney.
match Jessica to be, when do you have to roll the paperwork out? Is it before next Wednesday? Timeline
I'm not
wise?
so sure right now.
I can ask Jessica to be prepared to talk about it with you, May 11th, and resurrect that memo. It was Kingsbury that gave the advice at the time. And Bill's correct, it was an unconstitutional practice in terms of redistributing the taxes. I don't know about the litigation or what the risk is about being sued. We are not the only ones who have it in terms of a school district, but not every school district has it.
And how long has this been around?
Oh,
Probably 10 years now.
Yeah.
Because I was just gonna say, I just think like we preach about community and being a community-oriented area and school district, and I just think that if we didn't continue it without giving any warning, that isn't necessarily community-minded. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you could always decide to phase it out and not accept any new applications per se. Like if you've been getting it and you've been applying every year, meeting that criteria, you could phase it out that way too, if you want to get rid of it.
I'm gonna ask that question. Can we not limit to only previous applicants?
Correct. And then eventually the population will decrease down.
That might be more discriminatory, so I need to ask that question.
I don't know. I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying, I also don't want to see someone who falls in that lower income category, all of a sudden get a bill and they're like, I can't pay this. Especially in the climate of where we're at with inflation at all-time high.
Yep.
I also have a heart and I feel terrible about that.
I totally agree. I just need to check on the question. Can you limit it to only previous applicants and not accepting new applicants? I will have Jessica prepared to talk about both of those next week. I don't know if it's within the time frame of when we typically roll them out as to whether or not.
We usually post the applications May 1st,
So we're already. Posted for.
but we can open it up anytime.
All right, well then I would just hold it for a week and let them get her Jessica's opinion next Wednesday and then make a decision from there.
All right. That's not an easy one.
Yeah, that we just reaffirmed, it's the same thing with 7,500, it wasn't popular when we took that away in terms of dual enrollment, but we did take the 7,500 away, so dual enrollment is at a reduced cost, but none reimbursed through the district.
All right. Whole business, item listed. New business, we have election of treasurer coming up for the school year on June 30th. Todd's term ends, and I asked Todd if he'd be agreeable to being treasurer one more year, since we have the bonding and the plates and the signatures and all that kind of stuff in place. And he said it'd be willing. Is there anybody else that would like to be considered?
I will put Todd's name on the agenda for your approval.
I will continue to ask my finance questions.
All right, on your reports. So we should ask you the questions.
Courtesy of any other new business from board members? And we offer courtesy the floor once again. Sir, thanks for being with us and keeping us safe. We do have an executive session for personnel immediately following this meeting, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Feinstein, second by Mr.
Yeah, to kind of see where our shortfall was.